Standing tall against a multinational corporate agenda. The Rick Smith Show.
All the things you want are real. You have you to complete, and there is no deal.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So Friday is the big day. If nothing gets done in Congress over the next couple of days, which I'm told may not happen, I'm told the transportation bill on the federal level may not happen, which means the Highway Trust Fund goes kaboom on Friday. No more money. The certainty of building hath stopped. And that might mean a wave of unemployment. And what does that mean here in Pennsylvania? Since we changed our unemployment compensation laws to really stick it to those construction workers? Well, here to answer that and a couple other things, we've asked our good friend, attorney Erwin Aronson, to come talk with us. Erwin, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, good to be here, Rick. How are you?
I'm good, but I'm looking at Friday, and what I'm told is if Boehner and McConnell can't come to some kind of an agreement on what they want to do, McConnell wants a 6-year plan that's half paid for. Boehner does not. He wants, I guess, a 5-month, a 90-day. They're all over the map. If nothing happens Friday, they all go on vacation like the Republicans did here in Harrisburg over the budget. What happens? What happens to all these guys and gals who are working on our roads and bridges if the money all dries up and they're unemployed?
Well, you may not have intended this to be such, but you've just asked like 20 questions, not one. First of all, we need to deal with the first question, which is what the relationship is between federal highway funding and the Federal Highway Trust Fund and current ongoing road construction in Pennsylvania. That the Federal Highway Trust Fund is not the only pot of funds from which highway construction in this state is financed. As you and I suspect our listeners will recall, the year before last, the General Assembly approved, with significant support from labor movement in general, because of its job creating and safety creating potential, a very significant bond issue financed by increased gas taxes and PennDOT-based user fees for operator licenses and automobile registration and motorcycle registration and so on. That has put and stimulated a great deal of road construction, much of it local, but some of it not local. And at the same time, there also were significant increases in Pennsylvania Turnpike tolls that are financing a significant amount of construction on the Pennsylvania Turnpike, not only on the main branch, but also on the Northeast Extension and in the Mon Valley area. So that funding source remains uninterrupted even after the floor leadership, the Republican floor leadership in the United States Congress, fails to do its job and packs up its bags and goes home while compromising the safety and well-being of people. So we have a lot of specialized bridge construction, for example, that is going on throughout the state that is funded by that state-based funding. And at the same time, there is a lot of other work that's being done on the interstate highway system, and I assume that some amount of funds for that construction that is ongoing in Pennsylvania is what is called in the world of the entities that rely on those funding sources, funds that are committed. So when funds are committed, they're considered allocated and spendable, even if they haven't been expended. So when the money dries up because of a failure of legislative congressional action, those funds that have been committed are theoretically still available, and it's only funds that would be newly committed for jobs that are in the pipeline but not yet awarded that would be prospectively affected by Congress not approving another Federal Highway Trust Fund spending bill.
So what you're saying, if I'm getting this right, then is, if they don't do their job by Friday, it's not going to have a huge ripple effect that'll affect the people who are working right now.
Well, that's a question that remains unanswered, and that's exactly where I was going. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. Once we get past those pieces of funding that are either not federal or federal but federally committed to a point where they can't be undermined, whatever that is, there is some more that is in the pipeline or ought to be in the pipeline that needs to be approved, that has to do with safety and has to do with traffic control. It has to do with a whole bunch of things. It's not as if these are projects that are in the dream stage. These are projects that are approved and they're in the specification and bidding stages. So those projects will come to a grinding halt and the whole process will come to a grinding halt. And there will, of inevitability, be some number of people who either immediately or soon lose their jobs in construction, because here in the northeastern part of the country, the construction season for highway construction does have some limits. Once the weather gets really difficult and the roads start getting covered with snow and icing over, and the coldness that inhibits or limits or restricts the capacity of road building materials to timely and adequately cure and dry and become useful takes place, people get laid off. And you alluded to this, and I don't know if it was an intentional allusion or accidental, but construction workers in Pennsylvania face really dire consequences because of something known as Act 60.
Right.
Act 60 was a series of amendments to the Pennsylvania unemployment insurance law. And I say unemployment insurance and correct myself about unemployment compensation, because unemployment insurance is really that. It's an insurance program where employers and workers in Pennsylvania is one of only 3 states where workers participate, pay an insurance premium to the state for providing unemployment insurance benefits to people when they lose their jobs. There's a cap and a limit on how much people can get as benefits. But Act 60 that was passed 3 years ago by the General Assembly in Pennsylvania through the advocacy of former Governor Tom Corbett and Governor Corbett's then Secretary of Labor and Industry, who is no longer in place, but who was the secretary at that time, advocated a series of changes in the unemployment insurance law that, despite people paying their premiums, their insurance premiums, their unemployment insurance benefit premiums, both workers who are making contributions to the system on every single penny that they earn, and their employers who, as a matter of law, are paying the employer's share on a taxable wage base of roughly $9,000 now per year on every employee that they employ during the course of the year. And if it's a construction worker and that employee, because of the nature of the construction business, has 3 or 4 or 5 employers in the course of a year, each one of those employers pays on that taxable wage base. So in that instance, the state may have actually collected 5 or 6 or 700% of the actual premium for the unemployment insurance. But Act 60 has a provision in it that basically focuses and drills in on construction workers who earn their wages in concentrated periods of the year, where they may be during a highway construction season or during a powerhouse shutdown for retrofitting and repair. They may work 7, 10, or 7, 12-hour days per week and have a high amount of wages in a concentrated period. And Act 60, as passed through the advocacy of the Corbett administration and the support of people like now Speaker Turzai and now President Pro Tem of the Senate, Joe Scarnati, and floor leader in the Senate, Republicans, Senator Corman, says that workers who earn a living in Pennsylvania must earn at least 49.5% of their annual wages outside of their highest quarter wages in order to be eligible for unemployment insurance benefits in this state.
That sounds to me like a direct attack on the very people we're talking about.
It certainly appeared that way to all of us when this was happening, to Frank Sirianni in his capacity as president of the state building trades, to Rick Bloomingdale and Frank Snyder in their capacities as president and secretary treasurer of the Pennsylvania AFL-CIO. And we pointed that out to then Secretary of Labor and Industry, Julia Harthway. And intriguingly enough, Harthway described that as saving $50 million.
Wow.
Saving $50 million meant denying unemployment insurance benefits to people at a level of $50 million.
I got to tell you, I've always loved that. We're saving money by stealing from somebody else. I've always loved that frame.
Well, it even gets better, because we were saving, use that word in quotes, money for Pennsylvania corporations that had artificially diminished that taxable wage base, of which I spoke a few minutes ago, for decades, and in so doing starved the Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund in this state, which caused the Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund in this state to engage in very heavy borrowing from the Federal Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund. That's part of the Social Security Fund, quite frankly. And when the federal government said, hey, you business guys, you big insurance companies, you Marcellus Shale drilling companies, you gas and oil companies like Sun Oil and Royal Dutch Shell and Exxon Mobil, you big banks like Citizens, and you pick the list here. I don't have to go through this. And all you big public utilities, you investor-owned public utilities that have underfunded a system, all you healthcare employers like UPMC that have intentionally underfunded the system, are now going to have to start to pay back the money that you borrowed, that the government of the United States has to this point been giving you interest-free. Their response was, well, of course we have to pay our bills. No, that wasn't their response. Their response was, well, we got to cut benefits and restrict eligibility for the people who were the victims of that economy that caused them to do so. And they singled out construction workers for special treatment. Now, then Labor and Industry Secretary Julia Harthway told us that it was going to be $50 million that they would save. We responded by saying two things. Number one, Madam Secretary, what you call savings, we call a denial of subsistence to people who are unemployed through no fault of their own.
Wow, that's such a nice way of putting wage theft.
And that's what it is. That's wage theft. That's wage theft.
That's why you're the lawyer in this, and I'm just the guy behind the microphone. Because to me, that savings that they're talking about is theft. You're taking food off of children's tables.
Well, it's even worse than that. You're taking food off of children's tables when their fathers and mothers and their fathers and mothers' employers have all paid 100% of the insurance premium. So this is much more like saying to somebody, so the survivors of somebody who paid a premium on a life insurance policy for an entire lifetime, that when the person passes away, the designated beneficiary of that life insurance policy is told, sorry, Mrs. Smith, we're not going to be paying you because a couple of weeks ago we changed the rules, and just because the premium was paid on your husband's life for 40 years, we decided that we don't have to pay you anyway. That's what it really is. It's like a health insurance policy that says we're going to collect a premium for or on your behalf every month, but when you go to the hospital, we're not going to pay for the bills.
That's just amazing to me. And yet, I would like to make the argument that maybe we could have some savings into our system if we just had people paying their taxes. That would be some savings for we the people.
Sure. There you go. Maybe pay taxes. Maybe pay them on time. Maybe pay what's actually owed. Instead, we tell businesses, don't pay your taxes. Instead, give it to a system called the Educational Improvement Tax Credit, EITC, in Pennsylvania. And what will happen is we'll give you a credit against your tax obligation for funding kids to go to private schools.
Probably your own kids.
Normally your own kids. But go back on this $50 million number that Secretary Harthway said was savings, and we said was denying people benefits that they had paid for, that their employers had paid for. it's not $50 million. It's $50 million every year. And it's a new group of people every year. Because once you're disqualified from benefits, you have to have earnings in covered employment to ever become eligible again. So that's the following year, it's $50 million more out of the hides of more people. And intriguingly enough, Secretary Hathaway at the time represented to all of us that this $50 million savings that she was referring to, $50 million being taken out of the hides of working men and women who lose their jobs, $50 million, by the way, also being taken out of Pennsylvania's economy that would otherwise be paying for groceries and medication and sneakers for the kids when they go back to school, and maybe rent and maybe electric and gas and phone bills and maybe cable TV bills even, perish the thought. That was going to affect between 34 and 39,000 Pennsylvanians. So last year, at the end of the session, they came to us and said, we want to do a partial fix. We have a fix that will restore benefits to about 2,100 to 2,200 of those 39,000 people.
That's not really a fix.
Well, it gets better. Not only is it not really a fix, but they said restoring benefits to that small group of people would cost $26 million a year.
Oh, stop. I'm not a mathematician, but restoring benefits to what, 10%?
Not even 10%.
Maybe?
Not even 10%. More like 6.5%.
And not getting in half? It just doesn't jive to me.
Yeah, well, I responded by saying, I was a student in high school when they invented what they called the new math. And I admit that I went to law school because I had some difficulty with mathematics, but I didn't have that much difficulty. And they told me that my recollections were wrong, and God bless him, Frank Sirianni, the president of State Building Trades, happened to have his computer with him, and he pulled out the very PowerPoint that Secretary Hathaway and her staff had shown us as they were advocating this legislation that demonstrated with absolute crystal clarity, Rick, that this is exactly what they represented to us, and it couldn't be. One of the two mathematical equations that they were using had to have been wrong. Had to have been wrong. So here we are all these months later, and the unions represented by the State Building Trades and the Pennsylvania AFL-CIO have proposed legislation in the General Assembly. It's been introduced in the House of Representatives. The prime sponsor is Republican Representative Eugene DiGirolamo to fix this and other things that they did to the unemployment insurance statute in Act 60, because along with imposing that 49.5% number for the first time in the existence of the unemployment insurance statute, they also made a number of other changes that restrict eligibility as well as cut benefits. One of those is the unemployment insurance statute used to have up to 4 steps, where if your high quarterly wages were at one level and your annual wages were at a level that would be lower than what you would be expected when you multiply your high quarter times 4 with your annual wage, that you could step down to a lower benefit level and still not have your benefits eliminated, or your benefit eligibility eliminated. And they, in Act 60, got rid of a step in the step down procedure, so that further cut people's eligibility for benefits.
And that was really the point, right? I mean,
well, that was the entire point, is the business community, led by the Chamber of Business and Industry and led by the National Federation of Independent Business and led by others of that ilk, first intentionally lobbied hard to keep the system underfunded and continue this process of borrowing very heavily. The borrowing was in excess of $4.3 billion with a B dollars that they borrowed. And Act 60 that we're speaking of included the largest single bond issue guaranteed by the full faith and credit of the taxpayers of Pennsylvania to bail the business community out of this debt.
Yeah, but at least Governor Corbin didn't raise our taxes, right?
He didn't raise our taxes. He raised user fees. But this particular one is especially repugnant because by issuing that bond issue and paying off the debt that the business community had accumulated by underfunding the system, they also preserved for the business community a federal tax credit known as the FUTA, or Federal Unemployment Compensation Tax Act credit, for the entire business community that would have otherwise been lost as a method by which to pay back the federal government the borrowing. And they also eliminated the interest on that debt that would have had to been paid to the federal government. In return for that, you would think that they would want to expand eligibility or increase benefits for the people who are paying the bill. But instead, they cut benefits and restricted eligibility even further, even as we taxpayers were saddled with this $4 billion with a B plus dollar debt to pay off their intentional conduct. And I say that and repeatedly say intentional conduct because it can't be described as any alternative to that, period. And I am sad to say it that way, but that's the way it is.
So let me ask you a last question then. What are we doing to fix this? How can we help? What should we be doing to make sure that people get the unemployment insurance that they've paid for and that they're entitled to?
Well, at this point, we should all be calling into our members of the State General Assembly, of the State House of Representatives, and ultimately the State Senate, and asking them to support Representative DiGirolamo's legislation to fix Act 60. That's number one. And number two, keep an open eye. The Pennsylvania Senate Labor and Industry Committee is having a public hearing next week on Tuesday in Erie, Pennsylvania, at which this issue is going to be raised. And there's going to be a panel from the business community. There will be a panel of contractors and contractor associations folks. And there will be a panel of representatives from the state building trades. And I am going to participate along with, in order to assist, Pennsylvania State Building Trades President Frank Sirianni and Secretary Treasurer Walt Frederick and Abe Amoros, the representative, the legislative director for the Mid-Atlantic Laborers, on their presentations to their panel. I'll be there as a resource for them and to the Labor and Industry Committee. Unfortunately, I've been around a long time, maybe fortunately for me, not necessarily fortunate for anybody else. So I have more than a passing understanding and touchstone of the history and development of the unemployment compensation statute in this state going back to the early 1970s. So I'm planning on being there myself in Erie as a resource to the committee members and committee staff that are dealing with this, and understand as well that this is not only hurting working men and women, it's hurting many of our real and meaningful legitimate contractors in Pennsylvania who are finding that the workforce that they rely upon, that is not a 5-day or a 7-day a week, 52-week a year workforce, but it's a workforce that gets referred out on a job-by-job basis, not seasonally, of course, because they're not seasonal workers. They're deeply attached to the workforce, but they work when the work is around and available, as opposed to every single day in an office setting, for example. Those contractor employers are also being very deeply affected by this, because when people are ineligible for unemployment insurance benefits for which both they and their employers have paid, they need to support their families, so they're looking for alternative occupations and leaving the construction industry, and by doing so, making it more difficult to hire competent, qualified, experienced, well-trained building trades people to do these jobs when they're available and when they're necessary.
Yeah. Well, it's a good thing you're on it, and I'd love to hear more about it as this continues on down the road.
Well, I'll be more than pleased and honored to report on it to you and through you to our listeners as this continues to develop.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Erwin.
Thank you, sir.
Let's take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. Still there?
The Rick Smith Show.
Not some homes, not most homes, every home in America.
Hillary Clinton pledges to go big, very big, on solar. Jeb Bush calls for eliminating all energy subsidies. Plus,
well, this is the biggest threat that the planet faces.
New study suggests worst-case sea level rise may be sooner than we think.
Fantastic. All of those worst cases and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Well, I'm not a scientist either. I'm just a grandmother with 2 eyes and a brain, and I know we're facing a huge problem from climate change.
Well, way to lose the one-eyed grandmother vote, Hillary. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, I got to say, the fact that the candidates for 2016 are now being pushed to come out with climate plans, now being pushed to come out with answers. The answers are terrible, frankly. I'm not impressed with pretty much any of them. But at least the corporate media seems to be holding their feet to the fire this time around, unlike in 2012.
That's right. It is a whole new ballgame with the presidential campaign actually talking about climate change.
Imagine that.
So let's talk about it. First, Republican Jeb Bush called for eliminating specialized tax credits for all energy sources at a campaign fundraiser in Iowa over the weekend. He's the first Republican candidate to even mention oil and gas taxpayer subsidies enjoyed by the wildly profitable oil and gas industry. Now, while eliminating subsidies for all energy might sound fair, it's not actually fair at all. Oil, gas, and coal have enjoyed direct taxpayer subsidies for nearly 100 years and indirect subsidies like U.S. military protection around the world. They also get the biggest subsidy of all. They don't have to pay for the cost of their pollution. You do.
Yeah, I love the idea that, we shouldn't subsidize anyone. We shouldn't pick winners and losers. Well, the winners in this case happen to be the most profitable industries in the history of civilization. And now Jeb Bush wants to pull up the ladder. So no one else in any of these new energy industries, they just can't enjoy the same thing that fossil fuel did for 100 years or so.
Now, Hillary Clinton spoke of rebalancing taxpayer subsidies for energy in her first major speech on climate change, rolling out what she said was the first plank of a comprehensive climate policy on Monday in Des Moines, Iowa. Secretary Clinton says the U.S. can be the world's clean energy superpower by going big on solar.
We need to have more than 500 million solar panels installed across the country by the end of my first term. Second, we'll set a 10-year goal of generating enough renewable energy to power every single home in America. Not some homes, not most homes, every home in America.
So that's a pretty big pledge to make. It would be a 700% increase over current rates of solar panel installation. And she also wants to power all homes in the U.S. within 10 years with renewable energy.
Yeah, but I think I need to mention, if you talk to scientists, what she's proposing, at least as of now, is not nearly enough.
True. At that campaign event on Monday, Clinton declined to comment on the Keystone XL pipeline. Climate activist Bill McKibben said of Clinton's plan, quote, Hillary Clinton is halfway there. Now we need Clinton to show she understands the other half of the climate change equation, which he says is keeping it in the ground. As for Clinton's fellow challengers for the Democratic nomination, former Maryland Governor Martin O'Malley has actually gone even further. His energy policy, released last month, calls for the U.S. to be 100% renewable energy by 2050, as in no fossil fuels at all. Now, that is technically feasible with today's technology, but not with today's Republican Party in control of Congress. A disturbing new study now says that further delay in moving away from fossil fuels could unleash rapid sea level rise. That's according to a former NASA climate chief, James Hansen, who has co-authored a bombshell new study warning that global warming could accelerate extreme weather and rising seas. In an interview with CBS News, he said sea levels could potentially rise as fast as 10 feet in just 50 years.
If we get sea level rise of several meters, all coastal cities become dysfunctional.
And when he says dysfunctional, he means like goodbye Miami. In an interview with the Broadcast this week, climate scientist Michael Mann, who was not involved in Hansen's new study, says the study makes a strong case that climate change is proceeding faster and is larger in magnitude than previous predictions.
We have tended to underestimate the rate and magnitude of the changes. And he's put together a pretty compelling picture here of what a worst case scenario might look like. And it's not pretty.
It's not pretty at all. And compelling is a very nice way to put it. Terrifying is the way I might describe it. For much more on that story and even some more encouraging ones, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Don't forget, you can download our reports anytime for free from Stitcher, TuneIn, or iTunes. Find us and follow us on the Facebook and the Twitters at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
The tide is high, but I'm holding on. I'm gonna be your
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
What the hell we fighting for? Just surrender anyone at all. Just got time to say your prayers while you're waiting for the hammer to fall.
Janice sent me an email here during the break in our conversation, during our conversation on employment, on the shooting in Cincinnati. Horrible tragedy. Another black man's life cut short because of poorly trained police departments. And, I mean, the whole poorly trained thing, I mean, to me is, I think, a big part of this. And, maybe the rules of engagement and how things are played out, I think that's a big part of it. But, I go back to myself and like anything, first I start off by saying, look, I've been the beneficiary of having white skin. I grew up in a housing project on the west side of Cleveland, a minority in a minority community. And while I was the minority in the minority community, I took a brunt of what? I got beat up often. Can I highlight often? And have been in those situations often where you're dealing with police who they're authoritarians. We have created in our urban centers war zones. It's no longer about community policing. It's no longer about being part of the community. It's about enforcing the law and every bit of it. And I got to be honest with you, every time I've been stopped, it's been in an area of poverty. It's been in one of those places. What are you doing here? Why are you here? Where are you going? You get those questions all the time. Now you can answer them, or you can begin to have this whole problem of what comes next, and what nothing ever good comes next. But to me, it's once you start getting into that world of law enforcement, the second the cop pulls you over, nothing good happens. And I'll say this 1,000 times. I have never in my lifetime, and this is one of those things where you go, really? I have never had a positive interaction with a police officer. Every interaction I've ever had with them has always been something negative. I've gotten a ticket. I've gotten yelled at, whatever. Now I didn't get shot or anything like that, but the vast majority of the times they're professional. They're doing what they're doing, but I've never had a positive moment. Never had a cop or a fireman come get a kitten out of a tree. Never any of that stuff. It's always been something negative. And that's the world that they live in. And it's always been my view, the second you start into that world of law enforcement, be it with the cop on the street or going through the court system, nothing good happens. Nothing. Now imagine living in an area where every time you turn around, you're being harassed by a cop. Every time you cross the street or don't stop enough at a stop sign or who knows what, not have a front license plate. And yeah, I have been pulled over numerous times for not having a front license plate. In fact, spent a weekend in jail over it. It was one of those things, actually spent a weekend in jail for not having a front license plate. Well, that wasn't the reason. That was the reason I got pulled over.
Oh, so why did you spend the weekend in jail then?
That's back when I was a younger man, much younger man, back in the early 90s. I had partaken in a little, some libations, and happened to go driving around. Got pulled over, DUI, and a whole bunch of nastiness that came out of that. I don't want to even get into that. But you had to go through a weekend drunk hotel weekend locked away and yelled at, which I did. You had to go to, I think it was 5 MAD meetings when MAD was big at the time so that people could then yell at you again. And there are a whole bunch of steps that you had to go through back. It was 1991, actually, because Ohio at the time had one of the toughest DUI laws in the country. And I went through all of this, and when I got pulled over, the cops said, well, the judge issued a bench warrant. We're going to have to take you in.
You'll be sleeping on the metal slab for a couple days.
Oh, that was an experience all in and of itself. Just amazing. It was so bad I can't even talk about it here on the air. I mean, that's how bad my experience in this jail setting was. But anyway, they take me to court, right? First thing in the morning, the judge goes, why are you here? And I go, exactly. Why am I here? I don't know. I go, well, you're the reason I'm here, Your Honor. Well, you can go home. Okay, how am I getting home? You've driven me all the way downtown. I live 20 miles from here. Start walking.
Just go.
And that's what it turned out to be. But look, nothing good came out of any of that stuff. Now, this is the part where I start looking at this from a different perspective, because I've been in those situations. Had I acted differently, had I decided, you know what, I'm not going anywhere, I'm going to turn the key and I'm going to take off, who knows where that goes? I don't understand that.
You might have ended up on TV, with a helicopter flying.
It could be. I could do the slow roll OJ chase, right? I don't understand that though. I just don't. I don't get why because nothing good comes from that.
No, I mean, I had a couple of times where, if I would have gotten pulled over for something, I would have gotten arrested. There's some things I thought were really smart. Not really smart at the time, but hey, let's go have some fun. And then afterwards, looking back on it, even right now, I was like, man, that was a really stupid idea that I did when I was home on Thanksgiving break. I went to a concert couple of nights before. I was at a different show in New Jersey. Got my face smashed in, took a couple elbows to the nose, broke my nose that weekend. Then Black Friday, took a trip down to South Street, Philadelphia, for a show at the TLA. The show didn't start till 6 o'clock in the evening. So I got there, indulged in some hallucinogenics for the show.
Oh yeah, jump right into that.
After the concert, it was 11 o'clock, and I was in the coming down phase, and I'm driving on the highway doing 70 to 75 miles an hour by myself with a cop following me for at least 2 miles. And just the political stickers on the back of my car might be enough of probable cause for me to get pulled over. But I mean, I'm sitting there looking in the mirror and there's this highway cop. I'm doing 75 miles an hour, 11 o'clock at night on I-95, just flying over the speed limit.
He's got to wonder why you're only doing 75 if you're on 95.
That's exactly what happened. In 2 seconds, a couple minutes later, he went in the right-hand lane, and just passed me and took off higher up the highway. But looking back on that, I'm just like, man, if I would have gotten pulled over right there, I'm over 21 at the time. So, that stays on your record. But
till you die.
But my sister, you see, the ARD classes you would have to go through with that, all the bull crap of just going back down to Philadelphia.
Yep.
My sister got caught in Bucks County with her boyfriend. They got caught smoking pot in their car on the way back.
Sounds like there's a lot of this illegality around you.
In my family.
It sounds like, maybe the police should be following you and beating you up on the side of the road.
Maybe. But here's another thing. My sister got caught smoking a bowl with her boyfriend on their drive back from the community college. And the process that happened after that, I thought was extremely despicable. They made my sister come into the police station, and then they wanted her to start rolling over on people higher up the chain.
Of course they do.
And my mom's asking me, what should she do?
She should take her beatings.
I said, absolutely nothing. Well, the cops are saying that we can get it dismissed, charges dismissed. I'm like, no, you don't want to be involved in that. And it happened to be listening to NPR, that same district attorney from Bucks County, Pennsylvania, tried that on someone else, and they ended up dead.
Yeah.
They ended up getting killed because they wanted to take out someone who was selling weed in that area. And that's our justice system, and that's what I find to be just getting involved in that type of stuff, and how they use low-level offenders to go up the food chain and take out high-level people. You don't want to get involved in that, and I just find that stuff to be very mistrusting of the law enforcement on another side.
So here's the other part of this, where the rest of, where most, I think where a good portion of the country is. Why be involved in it? I mean, and this is where it's always been curious to me of why people do some of the things that they do. I'm just, I don't know. It's just one of those things.
I know. Like the thing is, at the time, the Bucks County District Attorney would still want to prosecute those cases, while the Montgomery County District Attorney, literally right across the street. We live off of County Line Road between Bucks and Montgomery.
Do you want to give out your address?
No, but the district attorney in Montgomery County said all these cases are dropped. We're not even going to pursue these anymore because they're clogging up our system. So it just shows you even how ideological differences are in the Philly suburbs between some of these Republican prosecutors.
Interesting. Let's take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
It's kinda hard when everyone looks up to you. Try to make it look easy, gonna make it look good, like anybody would. I'm just your average, ordinary, everyday superhero, trying to save the world, but never really sure.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. As New Jersey Governor Chris Christie runs for president, he leaves a huge public pensions mess behind in the state he governs. 3 public pension funds are suing New Jersey for billions of dollars in damages for failing to fully fund pensions. The Democrat-controlled state legislature has twice sent Christie budgets fully funding pensions, and twice Christie vetoed them. New Jersey Education Association President Wendell Steinhauer says public pensions are sustainable in New Jersey, but the state has to pay its share and meet its obligation to workers who earn their pensions with decades of labor.
Yes, they are sustainable. There's just one key to doing it, and that is the state funding their share of it. We'll exhaust all legal pursuits. But what we're doing is we're working with the legislature to make sure that they can do something that we can get funding into. They've talked about a constitutional amendment. If this governor won't work with us, then we have to find ways to work around him. Or we're going to have to wait for the next election to hopefully replace him in 2018.
Steinhauer says the New Jersey Education Association is refusing to negotiate with Christie over pensions until funding is put in.
What the governor has called for is concessions in health benefits from our workers to address any form of payment or to even sit down and talk about more pension funding. And our position is that we've already had those talks. That was done in law, and that it's up to him to make his obligation. So until money comes in, there's no sense in sitting down with him. We know that story. He's sat down. He doesn't keep his word, even in a law that he signed.
The 2011 law called for billions in pension payments, and Christie reneged on that funding. Workers, meanwhile, have continued to pay their share into the public pensions system. More than 82,000 people nationwide are participating in the first national grassroots organizing meeting for the Bernie Sanders presidential campaign. The campaign says 3,146 homes, town squares, coffee shops, and union halls will host the meetings. The Vermont U.S. Senator will appear via video. It's an effort to build the political revolution Sanders is calling for as he runs for president and against the billionaire class. The Sanders campaign says this shows Sanders has the people with him while the billionaires are backing other candidates. The Sanders campaign says no other presidential campaign, not even Obama's, has had this many grassroots events this early on in the race. Workers Independent News is made possible in part through underwriting support from the United Auto Workers Union and from the International Association of Machinists. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Minimum wage.
You know what it means when they pay you minimum wage? You know what they're trying to tell you is like, hey, if I could pay you less, I would.
I had a great conversation last night over dinner about the minimum wage last night. It was one of those things that you couldn't. It had to be someone who listens to the program that then just wanted to troll me at dinner. I just had to be what it was. I went to one of the diners locally, and because my wife's on the road with the kids, they're down in South Carolina, doing the vacation thing with Grandpa, which again, I'm jealous as all can be. Nothing I would rather be doing than laying on the beach, wailed up on the beach, there, not worrying about work, not talking about anything, just kind of hanging out, not being attacked by sharks. So I don't cook, so I go out, because it's just easier. Then I don't have to do the dishes because my wife says when she comes back, the dishes better be clean. So it's my goal not to use any of them this way, because you learn a little bit about me. I don't like to do dishes either, even though we've got a dishwasher. So, yeah, that's about all of it. It's a pain loading the thing up and then remembering that little packet, and it's a whole thing. So I'm at the counter. I'm having my my slop, and the guy starts going in about all of this, these welfare recipients and how they don't want to work anyway, and and the waitress is kind of like, you're a giant piece of steaming, what, and she's just giving him as an observer, I'm looking at this, she's giving him every dagger stare I think she can think of without actually doing anything. Because look, her livelihood is based on this idiot leaving her a tip at the end of the night. So she gets it firsthand. I mean, she gets it right there. He goes into I heard that there's a cliff and that people are lazy and they won't. And it had to be. That's all I can think of, Sean, is it had to be someone who goes, I heard Rick, I heard this idiot on the radio and I'm going to get him. That's all I can think of, because he went into every right-wing, idiotic, nonsensical talking point you could think of. And I think it was just to bait me. That's all I can think of.
Well, what did you do? Did you just keep on eating, or did you turn around and said something to him?
Well, I can't walk away from those. And it's one of those, it's an ailment, it's kind of an addiction. It's a disease I have.
I know what that's like.
It's a burden that I have to carry, that I can't let someone walk around in this world ignorant. I have to help them.
So when someone says something stupid in public,
I have to help them. And I frame it in a way of helping. I'm not going to say, you're an idiot, dummy. I say, have you ever worked for minimum wage? And the truth of the matter is no, he had not. And you go through this, and you know what minimum wage is today. Amazingly, did not. Thought the minimum wage was $9 an hour.
Wow, really?
Yeah, I'm going, really? Because
did
if
you
listen,
like spit something out while you were eating? Did it like boom?
No, I because I didn't want him to think that when I get into these situations where I'm thinking that, maybe this guy had listened to the show and maybe he's just goading me into a conflict. I try to be overly nice. In fact, not just overly nice, but condescendingly overly nice. Like, oh, you poor thing. One of those things. And, I'm walking through all this stuff with him going, we've set this up that, so you can have a cheap hamburger, or here at this restaurant that the meal's going to be a little bit cheaper because the waitress doesn't make any money doing it. She's, reliant on your tip. And I actually made him feel bad for what he left as a tip, because I said, as he was leaving, I pointed out, I go, I don't know what your bill was, but that doesn't look like enough. I go,
you
generally
tip shame them in public.
Absolutely. I go, actually, 15% should be the minimum. That should be the bare minimum. That's if she poured soup in your lap. You should help her out a little bit. She do a good job. I thought she did great. She did great for me. She did good. You should leave her more. And it was just weird conversation where he eventually then stormed off. But the cliff thing came up. That, there are those people, they don't want to work because they're getting all of these benefits. And I said, well, name one. Well, I know my, I forget what relative, aunts, nephews, cousins, brothers, uncles, sisters, cousin. So I know them. I go, really? You do? I pulled out my phone. I said, let's call. Let's turn them in. Let's get them. We can do this. You and me. And, it was one of those things where then he was like, well, and I find that, when people bring that stuff, I know somebody, that's a giant steaming pile of all of these anecdotal, I know somebody is nonsense. Because nobody, and I've asked a number of people, I got the number, let's call.
Then you should have told him, like after that, you should have went into the fact that his food, the reason why it's so cheap, because it's subsidized by foreign immigrant labor.
Oh, see, I didn't want to go there. That might have gotten me killed in the parking lot.
That's like the best. That's how you take it one step further. I don't know about you, but I like going right to the, like, you want to have it, let's go right to it type of thing.
All right,
I don't dance around it.
Yeah, I wasn't going to go there, but it was just amazing to me. And now I'm not arrogant enough to think he was just goading me into a fight, but it's amazing how the workforce in this country, especially the working class, has been almost brainwashed into these talking points. Because on a certain level, it makes sense, doesn't it? That, you're not going to want to work any harder than you have to because you might lose some of these subsidies. That, if you're able to pay your rent and buy food and get your kids' school lunch programs and get all of the other things that supposedly are out there for people who are smart enough to navigate through this massive obstacle course, that, then you can say, well, I'm not going to work.
See, I get these type of lectures from my brother all the time, the business owner in the family. He doesn't believe that people who work for a wage and sustain their families should be given benefits. He doesn't think they should be giving retirement or health care because they're not risk takers. They're not the ones going out there putting everything on the line and trying to start their own business.
Whoa. Walk back through what? Walk me back through the people who work for somebody else shouldn't get health care or pensions.
This is what my brother believes. He says,
was he dropped on his head as a kid?
He might have. He did run into the boardwalk once while camping and knocked himself out. Might have gone back to there. But he would always say, if you're just working paycheck to paycheck and trying to sustain, not taking a risk, and, you're just trying to get by paying the bills and maybe doing some other things and going out on the weekends and having a good time on Friday night, you're one of those type of workers, who wants to go to I like going to the bar on Friday nights. I don't know about you.
Well, it sounds like you go to the bar Monday through Sunday.
Well, they have a dedicated chair there.
I know. I've heard they got a plaque on one of the stools. It's got your ass cheek.
Little name.
It's got the cheeks right there.
But he does not believe that those type of workers should be given health insurance or retirement because they're not the risk takers. They're not the ones out there generating the wealth.
Does he understand that healthcare and pension and those things are part of the compensation package that have been negotiated over the years? Does he get that? And that most workers expect that now as part of the bargain that they have with employers? Because I'll agree with him to a certain point. If you don't have a union contract and you don't have it in writing, you probably shouldn't get any of those because they're going to screw you out of them eventually. That was a generation that fought for that stuff. He wants to give that back. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, he wants no 40-hour work week. He thinks that everyone should be working 50, 60 hours a week.
So then he would agree with Jeb Bush then.
Or Scott Walker. He's probably voting for Scott Walker, I'm guessing.
And okay, well, that's a wonderful thing.
This is like what I got to deal with in my family, and I'm the exact opposite. I'm voting for Bernie Sanders. I'll be walking around the house when I see him with my Feel the Burn shirt on, just to shove a little bit of pie in his face. But I have had those experiences with other issues while I'm sitting at a diner, and you just hear someone next to you say the most asinine comments on an issue. Like last couple years ago, we had a huge ice storm. Power was out for 5 days in my area, and all I heard at the bar was, "Yeah, those libtards and saying that global warming's real. Huh, look what's happening here. Ice storm, and we got no power for 5 days." And that's when the fork hit the plate. You heard that ting, and I lost it. And I was like, yeah, you know what's a good thing? The people who watch Fox News are dead and dying like you. And that was just
ouch.
Yeah,
ouch.
It did not go well over that since then. But
wow, you're vicious. I'm much worse than I am. That's a good place to. Wow,
you wouldn't go that far.
Not the dead and dying thing. Wow. All right. Well, back to your table.
Well, hey, it was the third day into this experience without having power. Have you ever lost power for more than 5 days before? Or
No.
4 days?
No,
It's absolutely horrible.
Because those of us who are prepared, we have generators.
We had a generator.
We're the
but
preppers.
Generators don't heat the whole house.
No, they don't. That's why
And-
you have a fire in the fireplace.
I was sleeping in my army bag for a couple of days. Like literally had to pull out my 0 degree mummy bag. And it was literally like 50 degrees inside the house for 4 days.
Just be glad the pipes didn't go boom boom.
Yeah.
Or maybe they did. Who knows? Right back. Stick around.
This is a fading American dream. This is a fading American dream. This is a fading American dream.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1970. That was the day the United Farm Workers, led by Cesar Chavez, signed their first union contract in California. It was a milestone victory for agricultural workers. Farm workers, often Mexican immigrants, had very strenuous working conditions. They worked long hours in the fields for extreme poverty wages. In the event that housing was provided, it was often unsanitary and of very poor quality. Filipino organizers sought to improve working conditions for agricultural workers. After the U.S. colonized the Philippines, many Filipinos were recruited to work on California farms. They began organizing as early as the 1930s, forming the Agricultural Workers Organizing Committee. The Agricultural Workers Organizing Committee reached prominence by the 1950s. At the same time, Mexican-American Cesar Chavez, along with Dolores Huerta, founded the National Farm Workers Association to organize the Mexican workers who were increasingly dominating the labor force in the fields. The Agricultural Workers Organizing Committee went on strike against the grape growers near Delano, California. Their goal was to get a raise of 20 cents per hour. When the owners refused to negotiate, the Agricultural Workers Organizing Committee reached out to Chavez. The two groups merged to create the United Farm Workers. The United Farm Workers Union was able to get the support of many in the public through a boycott of California grapes. While the boycott lasted some 5 years, grape growers received considerably negative press and suffered financially. As a result, on July 29, 1970, growers agreed to a contract with the United Farm Workers, the first such agreement in farm labor history. So the next time you're enjoying those tasty grapes, think about the workers and their brave efforts to unionize farm workers. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
We've been talking about the early days of the hotel business in America and an ambitious man named Harvey Parker. From the time he set foot in Boston, Parker worked hard, built a successful restaurant business, and by 1854, he was preparing for the biggest business venture of his life. In summary, he set out to build the best first-class hotel and restaurant in Boston, and he scored big. The list of rich and famous patrons at the Parker House goes on for pages. Poets Longfellow, Emerson, and Thoreau, ball players Babe Ruth, Ted Williams, and others. And John Wilkes Booth was registered there on April 5th and 6th, 1865, 1 week before he shot President Lincoln. There were even some staff members that became famous, such as Ho Chi Minh, a Parker House cook, and Malcolm X, who was a busboy. But join us again for the politicians. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
Well, it started again. I turn around flame. I'm moving the people that want to defend human rights. A fair wage. A quick return.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. Luke sent me an email yesterday. I was talking a little bit about Donald Trump and the $110,000 pension he's getting from the union SAG-AFTRA and the Screen Actors Guild. Sorry, and Luke points out that isn't this a guy who has replaced workers and had people crossing picket lines at some of his hotels? And I believe so. Yes, Luke, I think that's actually the case. But the sad reality is this is what happens when the Donald has so much power and so much control. $110,000 a year. All I can say is wow. The vast majority of people in this country who get pensions from their unions, nowhere near that. Anyway, here to talk about the news around the world and then across the country in the labor spectrum, I've asked Doug Cunningham. He is the producer over at the wonderful clips you hear at the beginning of each hour. Doug, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, it's always fantastic to be with you, Rick. Thank you for the opportunity.
So, I look at the story of Trumpster collecting $110,000 a year from the Screen Actors Guild, and I'm going, wow, how do I get one of those gigs?
Yeah, well, you're not the only one thinking like that, man. Me too. And unfortunately, I guess Donald Trump is my union brother. Since I'm in SAG-AFTRA, it's a merged union of the Screen Actors Guild and AFTRA, American Federation of Television and Radio Artists. But that union pension. Well, he has pretty decent in some cases. Now, I don't want to go out on a limb here because I don't know what his entire record is. But in some cases, buildings in New York were built by union labor when Trump built them a lot of the time. So there are certain situations here that where the Donald and unions might not be, enemies with each other. But still, somebody like that running around the country, this guy is such a blowhard. And quite frankly, the less we talk about Donald Trump, the better, in my opinion.
Oh, I'm hoping he makes it. I hope he goes all the way to convention. I hope he's the guy who comes out in November.
Yeah, you like Jon Stewart. He's just all giddy at the prospect of him being in the race and staying in the race.
Because the reality is this is a guy who he doesn't care what comes out. Politicians, most of them are measured in what they say. You don't know what's going to come out of Trump's mouth. And he, as I've been saying on the program, is speaking like we're his billionaire buddies in the back room of the males only wealth class country club. This is how they've been talking to each other for years.
Yeah, and I got to admit, on that one little score about the Trump candidacy, I have to admit that is refreshing, and I am entertained by that. Somebody who says what they mean. He was asked the other day on CNN about if he's going to prepare for this debate, and he said, "Prepare? I'm just going to be me. I'm going to be who I am, and we'll see what happens."
I love that.
So he's going to go and wing it at the debates and say whatever's on his mind. And most of the time, I think he's an arrogant SOB.
Yep.
When I see him, I hate everything he stands for. But when I see him take on these politicians and get them all twisted in knots over this ability of his to just speak bluntly and not care about what the polls say, I think that's a little bit refreshing. We need more of that, actually.
Now let's talk the other side, because all of my friends think Hillary's got it all wrapped up. But I'm looking at Bernie and I'm going, I like Bernie Sanders. I'm seeing that grassroots organizing that he said was going to be necessary. I'm seeing some of this.
Well, and we know that at the end of this month, the AFL-CIO is going to be talking to these candidates, including Mike Huckabee, by the way, to talk to them about to see whether they will endorse a candidate in the presidential race. And Bernie Sanders, of course, is one of those candidates, Hillary Clinton. But tonight, what Bernie is doing all over this country, thousands of locations, Rick, the last I heard it was up to around 3,500 locations, 82,000 people, grassroots organizing meetings in support of the Bernie Sanders presidential campaign, but not just for that, but in support of the political revolution that Bernie Sanders is calling for to take on the billionaire class. And I have to say, at this stage of the game in the presidential election cycle, he seems to be off to a good start. Now, the AFT has endorsed Hillary Clinton, the only major union so far as I know to endorse a presidential candidate.
Right.
So clearly they're backing Clinton, and they think that's the best choice for their members. But it's presenting somewhat of a challenge to labor around the country, because Bernie Sanders is almost 100% right down the line, just what labor wants in a politician when it comes to votes on the issues. So it's going to really come down to whether the AFL-CIO wants to endorse anybody for president this year, or whether they are going to calculate who is most likely to win and then tilt toward Clinton on that basis.
So is a win for Bernie if the unions stay out of it? Is that a win for him?
You know, I think it could be in some ways, in some respects. You know, because clearly labor gets caught between a rock and a hard place sometimes with these candidates, because you get a candidate who clearly seems more weaker than another in terms of the general election possibilities, right? But their record might be better than the candidate who has a stronger position to get elected in the general election. So those kinds of things have to be weighed out carefully, and labor has to come down and carefully allocate its resources here in the presidential race. And I really don't have any idea what the AFL-CIO executive board will actually end up doing.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. But here's the thing. I mean, if I don't know if you saw the same poll that I did, but Bernie beats all of the Republicans across the board. So to me, the November elections, the general elections, it looks like both of them could beat the Republican field at this point.
Well, so that would definitely take away that argument if anybody would be making it that Bernie somehow was not able to carry a general election. Look, I think people this is going to sound strange, but the Bernie Sanders crowd that's supporting him and the folks that are supporting Donald Trump in some respects are supporting the same kind of thing. They want somebody who really will do what they say they're going to do, not some political poll watcher who sits there and waits until the wind blows a certain direction and then has an opinion or a position. They want somebody who's really going to speak out bluntly about what the country needs and is really going to do what they say they're going to do.
Yeah.
And Bernie Sanders would clearly do that based on his record.
So let me ask you the other question of this, and this is the one I have with some of my intellectual friends who say, if we could have one of these outside presidents, is that one of those things that then the parties both unite against them and then we have absolute total gridlock? Because understand, the president doesn't have the dictatorial power to do anything he wants to do. If Trump were to become president, I think the Republicans and the Democrats would unite and go, this guy's crazy. We've got to do something.
Well, yeah, and the other thing, though, the wild card in that mix, though, Rick, is you're absolutely right. I mean, the president can't do much without some power and clout in Congress. But if Bernie Sanders, let's say he did become the candidate, for example, just for sake of argument for a moment, what that represents, I think, is a fundamental shift in the dynamic of presidential politics. If somebody like Sanders, who appeals so much to the grassroots, is so strong with labor, actually does get the nomination and is popular enough to get the funding and get the support and infrastructure to actually mount a real good campaign in a general election, that could be a game changer, and it could bring some congressional seats along with him.
Yeah, it could, but I look here in Pennsylvania, for instance. We elected last November probably one of the most progressive governors in the entire country. On a platform of we're going to raise spending on education. And simultaneously, while electing one of the most progressive governors in the country, we elected a more insane right-wing extremist House and Senate with bigger majorities for the Republicans in both chambers.
Yeah, coming from the state of Wisconsin, like I am where I'm based, I understand that kind of.
See, that's my fear.
Yeah.
So, I mean, but I'm glad to see the grassroots organizing, because I think a movement has to happen. And I think right now we're on that, you've been seeing little sparks of a movement popping up, the fast food workers, the retail workers, the Black Lives Matter movement. We're starting to see that smoldering of, hey, maybe something's going to explode. And the hope is that Bernie's at the front of that.
Well, and that's what's key. I mean, we need to build a permanent movement in this country, a labor progressive coalition with community allies and everybody else, Black Lives Matter and other organizations involved, and create an actual movement and an infrastructure that doesn't go away. It's not just up for an election cycle and then down again. We got to get out of this horse race mentality. If we win or if we lose, if we build a strong enough movement, that'll pay dividends in the future. So win, lose, or draw in any one election, if we can build a lasting movement from it, and build on that as we move along, we'll be in a much stronger position later on to try and defend pro-working family policies and progressive policies of all sorts. But we're in a real jam. If you look at the map in the United States of how many state legislatures and governor's offices are totally controlled by Republicans versus Democrats, I don't have the exact number on the top of my head, but you pull out the map and look at that, it's a sea of red.
Yeah.
So they've made enormous gains at the state level, and that could play into presidential politics too, with the power that they have at the state level.
Yeah, good.
But building a movement is the key, Rick. It's not about winning or losing any one election. It's about building a strong, sustainable movement that is able to have the capacity to fight back on behalf of working families and progressives going forward, no matter who wins, loses, or draws any one particular election.
I'm with you. Let's talk about pensions. I saw New Jersey, they got away with screwing some of their workforce out of their pensions. I just saw something out of Illinois or out of Chicago where it was ruled unconstitutional what they did. I mean, a lot of these states and cities are seeing, decades of underfunding, decades of the plan was to starve and destroy. We're now coming to the head where some of these states are going to have to really decide, how are things going to work out? And I think the courts are going to be a big part of this as well.
They are a big part of it. And there is a legal battle in New Jersey and other places, Illinois you mentioned as well, about pensions. And the problem is that they've been underfunded for years. The government, as an employer in public pensions, they didn't put in enough money over time. And so the more you underfund the pensions, the more shaky you make it, and then ultimately setting it up to fail. Then you get a politician in office like Governor Rauner in Illinois or Chris Christie in New Jersey, and they want to starve government as well. They don't like these things. They don't like these pensions, these public worker pensions or public worker unions or public worker wages or benefits for that matter. So they're trying to, they're setting themselves up, Rick, in this situation where they're claiming, it's unsustainable, it's unaffordable, after years and decades of not putting in your fair share. By the way, public workers all along have put in their fair share of the pension.
Exactly.
Payment,
And what I've been saying, Doug, for the longest time is that this is that redistribution of wealth from the working class of this country upward. No trickle down. This is trickle straight up from us to them. Social Security, pensions, you name it. We have given, the sacrifices to the chair, if you will, because you look at the tax code changes, you look at the assaults on Social Security, on pensions, on all of this stuff, and we've created this massive billionaire class at the expense of a middle class.
And please don't, and if you're listening to this out there and you're wondering what's the truth on pensions, do not believe the snake oil big lie that pensions are somehow unsustainable. In New Jersey, for example, the average public worker pension is $26,000 a year. Firefighters and teachers do a little better. They get up to about $40,000 a year in some cases, but $26,000 is the average pension in New Jersey, public worker pension. I talked with the New Jersey Education Association President Wendell Steinhauer, and he said, yes, they are sustainable, but you have to have a funding mechanism and you have to keep making the payments. You can't renege on this.
Yep.
So the resources are there. The political will needs to be there to make sure these pensions are protected, because they're not just something that's just given to workers. Workers earn these pensions over in some cases, decades of service on the job in public capacities, and in many cases give up raises in order to sweeten the benefits package and have a better and stronger benefits package.
Yeah.
So this is something they earn. So it's morally reprehensible that when they become ready to retire and collect that pension after decades of paying into it and earning it, that then somehow the rug is pulled out from under them. We can't allow that to happen in this country. And the more important point is we have the resources to make sure that it doesn't happen. It's not like we're all cash strapped and broke everywhere in this country at every governmental level. You can find the resources if the political will is there to do it. And that's what
Good point. But to me, I'm waiting for the workforce to file lawsuits, because to me, it's wage theft, what they've done. It's massive wage theft. That pension contribution was part of their wage package. It's part of their pay, and it's been stolen from them.
Yep.
And at some point, I'm waiting, and I know our court system's so screwed up that wouldn't fly, but to the average person, I think they get it, man. This was a ripoff. These workers got screwed, and now they're going to try and do like they got away with in the private sector and just all write it off.
And there are 3 public pension systems, public funds, in retirement funds in the state of New Jersey right now. They're suing Christie and the government in New Jersey, alleging billions of dollars that were not paid in, and that's a violation of the contract and agreement. So there are lawsuits proceeding on that basis. Christie was allowed to renege on pension payments in a case that went to the New Jersey Supreme Court, but the court did say even then that these workers are entitled to their payments and that the arguments the unions were making about pensions were correct. It's just that they gave Christie a pass on this one because of the budget crisis. Jeez. So what we're going to have to do in New Jersey, for example, there's a Democratic legislature controlled by the Democratic Party, both houses. So the unions and the public retirees, people involved with public pensions, are trying to get that legislature to figure out a way to get around Christie. And they said if they can't get around him, well, then they'll get rid of him in the election in 2018 and then fix the pension system. Because twice the New Jersey legislature has sent budget bills to Christie that would have fully funded those pensions, and Christie vetoed them.
Jeez. And finally, what's going on in Illinois? There may be a strike that the governor's talking about calling out the National Guard. What's going on?
Yeah.
We back in the
AFSCME
1800s again?
Yeah. I mean, AFSCME is up. Their contract is up. They're going to have a contract, I think, that ends at the end of this month, July 31st. If a new agreement isn't reached, the union could choose to go on strike. If they do, of course, that cause big problems in the state of Illinois. The governor's office has been trying to figure out how to get scabs and strike breakers in to break that strike if he triggers it. And one of the things that is mentioned was that the Illinois National Guard could be called in to fill in some empty positions. I don't know if that'll actually happen. One of the things he's been doing too, get this, is calling retired state workers to ask if they'd be willing to return to their old jobs if the strike happens.
Wow.
Good luck with that one. I mean, so instead of sitting down and coming to a deal, with these workers, you got to understand these are ideological enemies of working class power. They do not want workers to have any organized power that could even come close to competing with the billionaire class. And that's what this is about, to emasculate and eviscerate worker power on every level, everywhere you can, so that there's no capacity to fight back against the billionaire agenda. So we'll have to wait and see what AFSCME does in Illinois. Don't know for sure if they will actually go on strike, but it's quite possible.
That's something we'll have to keep a close eye on. Doug, I appreciate you taking time for us. Thanks so much.
You're welcome, Rick. Always fun to be with you.
Always great to talk with you. Doug Cunningham, he's the producer over at Workers Independent News. They're the folks who provide the clips at the beginning of every hour here on the program. You can check out their website, laborradio.org. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Not some homes, not most homes, every home in America.
Hillary Clinton pledges to go big, very big, on solar. Jeb Bush calls for eliminating all energy subsidies. Plus,
Well, this is the biggest threat that the planet faces.
new study suggests worst-case sea level rise may be sooner than we think.
Fantastic. All of those worst cases and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Well, I'm not a scientist either. I'm just a grandmother with 2 eyes and a brain, and I know we're facing a huge problem from climate change.
Well, way to lose the one-eyed grandmother vote, Hillary. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, I got to say, the fact that the candidates for 2016 are now being pushed to come out with climate plans, now being pushed to come out with answers. The answers are terrible, frankly. I'm not impressed with pretty much any of them. But at least the corporate media seems to be holding their feet to the fire this time around, unlike in 2012.
That's right. It is a whole new ballgame with the presidential campaign actually talking about climate change.
Imagine that.
So let's talk about it. First, Republican Jeb Bush called for eliminating specialized tax credits for all energy sources at a campaign fundraiser in Iowa over the weekend. He's the first Republican candidate to even mention oil and gas taxpayer subsidies enjoyed by the wildly profitable oil and gas industry. Now, while eliminating subsidies for all energy might sound fair, it's not actually fair at all. Oil, gas, and coal have enjoyed direct taxpayer subsidies for nearly 100 years and indirect subsidies like U.S. military protection around the world. They also get the biggest subsidy of all. They don't have to pay for the cost of their pollution. You do.
Yeah, I love the idea that, we shouldn't subsidize anyone. We shouldn't pick winners and losers. Well, the winners in this case happen to be the most profitable industries in the history of civilization. And now Jeb Bush wants to pull up the ladder so no one else in any of these new energy industries They just can't enjoy the same thing that fossil fuel did for 100 years or so.
Now, Hillary Clinton spoke of rebalancing taxpayer subsidies for energy in her first major speech on climate change, rolling out what she said was the first plank of a comprehensive climate policy on Monday in Des Moines, Iowa. Secretary Clinton says the U.S. can be the world's clean energy superpower by going big on solar.
We need to have more than 500 million solar panels installed across the country by the end of my first term. Second, we'll set a 10-year goal of generating enough renewable energy to power every single home in America. Not some homes, not most homes, every home in America.
So that's a pretty big pledge to make. It would be a 700% increase over current rates of solar panel installation. And she also wants to power all homes in the U.S. within 10 years with renewable energy.
Yeah, but I think I need to mention, if you talk to scientists, what she's proposing, at least as of now, is not nearly enough.
True. At that campaign event on Monday, Clinton declined to comment on the Keystone XL pipeline. Climate activist Bill McKibben said of Clinton's plan, quote, Hillary Clinton is halfway there. Now we need Clinton to show she understands the other half of the climate change equation, which he says is keeping it in the ground. As for Clinton's fellow challengers for the Democratic nomination, former Maryland Governor Martin O'Malley has actually gone even further. His energy policy, released last month, calls for the U.S. to be 100% renewable energy by 2050, as in no fossil fuels at all. Now, that is technically feasible with today's technology, but not with today's Republican Party in control of Congress. A disturbing new study now says that further delay in moving away from fossil fuels could unleash rapid sea level rise. That's according to a former NASA climate chief, James Hansen, who has co-authored a bombshell new study warning that global warming could accelerate extreme weather and rising seas. In an interview with CBS News, he said sea levels could potentially rise as fast as 10 feet in just 50 years.
If we get sea level rise of several meters, all coastal cities become dysfunctional.
And when he says dysfunctional, he means like goodbye Miami. In an interview with the Bradcast this week, climate scientist Michael Mann, who was not involved in Hansen's new study, says the study makes a strong case that climate change is proceeding faster and is larger in magnitude than previous predictions.
We have tended to underestimate the rate and magnitude of the changes. And he's put together a pretty compelling picture here of what a worst case scenario might look like. And it's not pretty.
It's not pretty at all. And compelling is a very nice way to put it. Terrifying is the way I might describe it. For much more on that story and even some more encouraging ones, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Don't forget, you can download our reports anytime for free from Stitcher, TuneIn, or iTunes. Find us and follow us on the Facebook and the Twitters at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
The tide is high, but I'm holding on. I'm gonna be your...
They want to wrap the kids around themselves and say it's about the kids, and it's not. We have 180,000 teachers in the state of Pennsylvania. If we laid off 10% of the teachers in Pennsylvania, we'd never miss them.
I am the eye in the sky, looking at you. I can read your mind. I am the maker of rules, dealing with fools. I can cheat you blind.
Yes, cheat you blind indeed. The good senator there, Scott Wagner. Yeah, we can get rid of those teachers. We don't need them. I'm going to fly around in my helicopter and look down on the rest of us and say everything's just fine down there. And my problem with people like Scott Wagner, not too bright between the ears. Really, I mean, when you stop and you think about it, you think of the insanity he comes out with, just not too bright in the ears. And another reason why we need to work to get him down the road, because I don't think we can do big things with people like him in our General Assembly. I don't think we can do positive things for the working folks here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, or not good things like I've seen up north in Connecticut. Yesterday, I understand their governor signed a piece of legislation that will guarantee some bit of labor education Indian labor history in the schools, which is why I've asked Ed Levy to come talk with us. He's the Secretary Treasurer of AFT Connecticut. Ed, thanks for taking time for us.
Glad to do it.
So walk me through this. What the governor signed a piece of legislation saying there's going to be labor history in the schools. Say it's not so.
No, it's so. In fact, I'm holding one of the pens he used to sign the bill right now. It's been a long process. We've been at this for 5 years. AFT Connecticut and the AFL-CIO in Connecticut have been after this. And gradually we wore them down. And we made the argument that you're not fully educated if you don't understand the role working people have played in building this country.
I'm right there with you. In fact, I've made the argument numerous times on this program that the uprising you saw in Wisconsin and a lot of the organizing that's come up, basically because of Scott Walker, the governor there, saying that he was going to call out the National Guard, and those kids at the university, they're harking back to their 8th grade labor history class, where when a governor calls out the National Guard, somebody's getting shot in the back.
We have a history of government opening fire on workers, unfortunately. And you realize that the rights that too often people just don't seem to realize were fought for and people died for. And we can't be casual about them.
So what does this curriculum look like? What he signed something yesterday. What did it say? What does it do? Where does it go?
The bill allows labor history to be taught as part of the curriculum. They're providing materials that have not been designed yet, but the materials will be provided to allow teachers to look at, to use labor history in the classroom, to teach about it in conjunction with capitalism and the growth of that.
So the way I understand, so the way I'm thinking this through then is that you'll learn the history that I learned, that the Molly Maguires were criminals and they were harming the capitalist system, right?
Right. No, I provided testimony on this bill 5 times, and one of the things that I always said was, if we're going to teach labor history, we have to honestly teach labor history. That the labor movement has made mistakes too. Too often they were divided by race, and too often it became insular. That's fine. We can talk about those things because we've learned from those things. But that's a whole different thing than teaching that, Henry Ford was fantastic and people were glad to have jobs for him when he actually had people open fire on some of his workers. I mean, that has to be known.
Absolutely.
And, you can now teach this without principals coming in and saying, no, we're going to write you up because you're un-American or you're teaching things will make people uncomfortable.
It's going to make them think, and how dare we want thinking in school?
That's right. I hear this all the time, well, the students felt uncomfortable. Well, that's part of being educated. You should feel less comfortable with some of your assumptions.
Well, wait a second. Hold on. Students feel uncomfortable? You guys teach the Civil War, right?
That's right. We do teach the Civil War, and we actually, some of our teachers are bold enough to say that one of the sides was probably more morally correct than the other side. You have to feel, you have to be willing to challenge people and young people and say, well, why do you think that? Why do you think that? How do you think we got a weekend? I mean, we're living in this. You mentioned Scott Walker. Scott Walker just signed a bill that did not guarantee a day off in 7. And people seem to just accept that as though it was okay. It's not okay. It's
well, I think because the rest
really
of us, I think because the rest of the country's been saddled with it. They go, well, why should Wisconsin be special? Why should they get a day off? Work every day like us, because we've become sadly that kind of a society. I don't have a pension, so screw those public sector workers and those teachers. They shouldn't have a pension either. And the same thing with the day off. I mean, I don't know what's wrong with the American psyche anymore, but I was always brought up to go, well, you've got it. Let me see how I can go about getting the same thing.
Right. I think it's just so much easier to resent the people that you see and not the people you don't see. And with income inequity spreading the way it has, we simply don't see the people who are benefiting. We just never meet them. We'll never meet them. And so we can look at, someone and say, wow, that guy that on my son, the parent of one of my son's little league teammates is, look at what he has. And I don't have any of that. And I can't get that. And that annoys you. But his boss, you'll never see.
Yeah, that's a good point. But I go back to this and I think about, you said a moment ago that labor's made some mistakes, and they have, because they're, in my view, and this is what I hope some of the teaching is about, and I've been pushing here in Pennsylvania to have something similar to what you guys have, the ability to teach it, and maybe something of a curriculum to where you talk about maybe, there were some divisions, but those divisions were always created by some other entity to pit one group against another so that somebody at the very top could go, well, I'm going to get more for me and less for everybody else.
Absolutely. And so much of this, how many kids know that AFT Connecticut was one of the sponsors of the March on Washington, or that the March on Washington was about jobs? That's just a fact that's forgotten.
Yep.
And that Martin Luther King was giving a speech for AFSCME workers on strike in Memphis on the day he was killed. These are, and that he valued workers' rights as a civil right. Those things are not spoken about, and hopefully the bill will not only allow it, but will create a climate in which teachers are considering it. And that's what I think is my biggest hope. I know some of our teachers have wanted me to go in and talk about labor history because I write about it, and they're not 100% sure if it's okay, if the union can come in and do that. And hopefully this will be a vehicle to get people to say, yeah, it is okay. Hopefully the power of the bill is not just in the wording of the bill, but in the idea of the bill, that labor history matters, that working people matter.
And the realization that things have changed and there was a fight involved in it. Because a number of years back, I wanted to start like an 8th grade essay contest where, 100 years ago, where would, as a 13-year-old, where would you be? And, the premise being that as a 13-year-old 100 years ago, you'd probably be working in a sweatshop or in a coal mine, or if you're a girl, you were working in a textile mill. It's just how things were then, and how progress through labor's struggles, through parents fighting for better opportunities for their kids, that we advanced to where we are. Sadly, I see us sliding backward, and I think that needs to be taught as well.
Yeah, when you look at what's happening just in terms of public education, which kind of went hand in hand with the labor movement, and where you see Nevada now, where the parents can say, well, I'm going to homeschool my child and keep the $5,497, I think it is, tax deduction, as and keep it, because and if you've got 4 kids and you don't have a job, that's going to be awfully tempting. And what you're creating is an uneducated peasant class, which is not a byproduct of the bill. It's the point of the bill.
Yep.
And these ideas can't be separated from the labor movement, because it was the labor movement that did get rid of child labor. And now when the children weren't working, they had to go somewhere, so they went to public schools. And there's a connection there that we're undoing.
And one that I think is extremely important for the next generation to understand, because, I think back to the stories that I learned about labor. I learned from my grandfather, who was, he was involved in a lot of these labor struggles in the 40s and 50s. And, he had heard stories from his father and before, and these things were handed down. I think we've gotten to a generation where there's at least a generation disconnect from any of those battles.
Absolutely. And when we see only 7% of the private sector unionized, you realize the kids aren't listening to that at the dinner table. Of course, we also live in a world where it's very hard to have a dinner table, but they're not hearing those stories from their fathers and their mothers anymore. And I'm not sure, certainly we're working on it at AFT Connecticut, but I'm not sure how many teachers think about their teacher union as part of their life. And if people don't connect to the union and don't tell their children about that, and then there's no way to learn it in school, then there's no way they're going to think about the union as anything other than dues.
Yep.
Because that's all they ever hear.
Yeah, exactly. I'm right there with you, and I think this is a great thing. I'm hoping someone here in Pennsylvania begins pushing for this type of thing. I think it's a good thing, and I give you guys all the credit, and your governor all the credit that you guys deserve.
It was a long struggle, and I want to thank, we had real champions in the state legislature. Senator Looney was always a champion of it, and we just fought it, and finally, after 5 years, we got it. And that's, when things get better, they get better slowly, but it's always worth the fight.
It's a step in the right direction. Ed, I appreciate you taking a little time for us and explaining what's going on up there. Good stuff.
Thank you very much. Nice to talk to you.
Thank you so much, Ed Levy. He's the Secretary Treasurer up there at AFT Connecticut. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
School days, I'm older now, and what will I find but my school days? School days, it's starting to slip, I'm losing my mind.
When it comes to pursuing their prey, sharks are master maneuverers. Loan sharks, that is. These days, this usurious species goes by the less threatening name of payday lenders. But they are no less voracious, targeting folks in rough financial straits and luring them with easy money come-ons. With lethal interest rates of more than 700%, automatic renewal clauses, and other razor-sharp gotchas, a $500 payday loan can sink a hapless borrower thousands of dollars into debt. That's why states have been restricting the sharks' interest rate gouging and entrapment techniques. But with a flip of their tails, many payday lenders are simply swimming around state laws by operating online and offshore from such regulatory safe harbors as the Bahamas, the Isle of Man, and Malta. From there, sharks can make loans, then begin devouring their borrowers' bank accounts, even in states that ban such loans. How can shady operators pull off billions of dollars worth of these devious and maybe illegal transactions each year? With inside help from such pillars of the financial establishment as Bank of America, J.P. Morgan Chase, and Wells Fargo. Of course, these upstanding corporate citizens don't dirty their hands or reputations by making these predatory loans, but they willingly allow offshore sharks to tap directly into the borrower's checking accounts and withdraw unconscionable interest payments electronically and mercilessly. There's a 4-letter F word for what the banks are doing to their own depositors: fees. Automatic withdrawals by the sharks can cause a tsunami of overdrafts in a borrower's bank account, and banks happily collect fat fees for every overdraft. This is Jim Hightower saying, for more information and action, go to responsiblelending.org.
To get more of Jim Hightower's populist take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to, visit www.hightowerlowdown.org.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. So you want to talk about screaming? Lou Barlotta. That's all I can say. Lou Barlotta. My congressman, and I got to tell you, I am not thrilled about it. He has come out and said, I remember being in school during the Cold War when teachers taught us to hide under the desks. He says, I fear we'll be teaching our own kids and grandkids that if Iran gets the bomb, we're going to be teaching my kids to hide under the desk. Let me let you in a little secret there, genius. If, let's say, the bomb is a very real, and this was always the dumb thing, and I hope we've gotten a little smarter, the desk is not going to help you. If they drop a bomb on your head, if they drop a nuclear bomb on your head, the desk doesn't help.
So you're telling me the concrete and the desk won't do anything?
No.
But here's the thing.
No.
Students are already doing this stuff in schools because people like Lou Barletta want crazy people to have guns.
Well, good point.
Just saying.
Hashtag just saying.
I'll do the Philly shrug. Just saying.
I you look at this and you go, how is this guy sitting in Congress?
Because he's a racist?
How is this guy sitting in Congress? I mean, I'm confused.
Because he went after a bunch of Mexicans a few years ago in Hazleton.
You
That's
know,
why.
Again, at the bottom of this, it comes down to Maslow's hierarchy of need. If they can scare us and fear us and keep us down there at the bottom and push down and hating each other and fearful of the world, then they win. The terrorists will win.
I have a question now, Rick. Does Iran have the capabilities of sending a nuclear bomb with an ICBM halfway around the world?
No.
Wait, really?
No, they don't have
You're telling me
they don't.
Breaking news?
Breaking news. There's no breaking news. Everyone knows it. It's like I hear the same thing. North Korea is going to nuke us if they can get the bomb across the street. I mean, have you seen their test? It's anticlimactic.
My bottle rockets go further.
Nuts, just nuts. And this is somebody who's sitting in the halls of Congress. This is somebody, oh my gosh. You want to talk about having problems? Right there. Here's the problem. How about instead of trying to fear people into hiding under the desk, how about passing a damn transportation bill? How about that? Under my, right back. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. As New Jersey Governor Chris Christie runs for president, he leaves a huge public pensions mess behind in the state he governs. 3 public pension funds are suing New Jersey for billions of dollars in damages for failing to fully fund pensions. The Democrat-controlled state legislature has twice sent Christie budgets fully funding pensions, and twice Christie vetoed them. New Jersey Education Association President Wendell Steinhauer says public pensions are sustainable in New Jersey, but the state has to pay its share and meet its obligation to workers who earn their pensions with decades of labor.
Yes, they are sustainable. There's just one key to doing it, and that is the state funding their share of it. We'll exhaust all legal pursuits. But what we're doing is we're working with the legislature to make sure that they can do something that we can get funding into. They've talked about a constitutional amendment. If this governor won't work with us, then we have to find ways to work around him. Or we're going to have to wait for the next election to hopefully replace him in 2018.
Steinhauer says the New Jersey Education Association is refusing to negotiate with Christie over pensions until funding is put in.
What the governor has called for is concessions in health benefits from our workers to address any form of payment or to even sit down and talk about more pension funding. And our position is that we've already had those talks. That was done in law, and that it's up to him to make his obligation. So until money comes in, there's no sense in sitting down with him. We know that story. He's sat down. He doesn't keep his word, even in a law that he signed.
The 2011 law called for billions in pension payments, and Christie reneged on that funding. Workers, meanwhile, have continued to pay their share into the public pensions system. More than 82,000 people nationwide are participating in the first national grassroots organizing meeting for the Bernie Sanders presidential campaign. The campaign says 3,146 homes, town squares, coffee shops, and union halls will host the meetings. The Vermont U.S. Senator will appear via video. It's an effort to build the political revolution Sanders is calling for, as he runs for president and against the billionaire class. The Sanders campaign says this shows Sanders has the people with him while the billionaires are backing other candidates. The Sanders campaign says no other presidential campaign, not even Obama's, has had this many grassroots events this early on in the race. Workers Independent News is made possible in part through underwriting support from the United Auto Workers Union and from the International Association of Machinists. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Standing up to conservatives and corporatists every weeknight. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm just an average man with an average life. I work from 9 to 5. Hey, hell, I pay the price. All I want is to be left alone in my average home. But why do I always feel like I'm in the twilight zone? And I always feel like somebody's watching me.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So you ever have that feeling that they're watching you? My uncle called me today and said, my boss gave me a new phone. Do you think there's GPS in this? You think they're tracking my every movement? I go, I'd bet on it. And that's just the company he works for. And you hear all of these stories about the NSA. You hear all of this stuff going on. And I came across this article written by a friend, Zed Jelani, over at Alternet, who points out that the Pentagon may be influencing what we see on television. Oh, Zed, say it isn't so. Tell me the Pentagon is not influencing what I see on American Idol.
Well, it's actually it's pretty interesting. There's a good website called spyculture.com that writes out about a lot of this stuff. And a guy over there, Tom Stecker, he did Freedom of Information Act requests with sort of the entertainment liaisons and the various branches of the military. And what he found was really interesting. I mean, we've known for years that the military, particularly if you're making a movie where you're trying to loan out military hardware or something for the movie, they kind of have to look at your script, edit your script, have heavy oversight. And that was sort of known for a while. But I think what's sort of new about what's happening here is that from his Freedom of Information Act request, we kind of realized that they're actually much more involved than it was previously expected. I mean, they're involved in television shows that don't have any military equipment, right? That don't have any of the sort of normal leasing requirements. Basically, they're trying to insert themselves into anything that Americans watch to try to put out a sort of positive message about the military itself and also, military operations.
And that's beyond the commercials that we see ad nauseum, because you can't watch television today without being hit with an army ad or any of the other ones. They're just everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I think even, if you play, sometimes play PlayStation and sometimes an Army ad will pop up if you go to the store, the PlayStation store, right? It's like a full screen ad, which I thought was kind of interesting. I've never seen anything like that before. So I think, I think particularly after the war in Iraq, which I think gave a lot of people sort of the idea that it's kind of a dangerous thing to join the military, or you're not getting a very good deal if you join the military. I think they had to do a lot to sort of boost the recruitment again. So I think that's part of why they're expanding all this.
Well, I mean, it's nothing new, though. I mean, this has been, this isn't a new phenomenon. I mean, after Vietnam, they did the exact same thing to my generation. They were always in the schools. They were always giving stuff away, whole bunch of promotion stuff. So I'm not surprised by this.
Yeah, and actually, David Sirota, he wrote a book about basically about pop culture in the 80s and politics, and I think particularly the post-Vietnam era, there was sort of a real backlash against the military. So for them, they were sort of thinking, well, our traditional methods aren't necessarily always going to work. We need to be more involved in movies. We need to be more involved in pop culture and music, and that's why you see from this FOIA request. You've seen even that they were even able to get a military person onto American Idol. They were a PSYOP specialist, meaning basic propaganda specialist. They were a little disappointed that they got voted off the season of American Idol, but they were able to do that. And everything from that to the Avengers, to talking to folks who were writing Veep, which is actually kind of a left-wing satirical show. But yeah, I mean they're everywhere. They're even some places in the documents where they're advising on video games, which which to me is kind of unusual. You wouldn't really necessarily expect the government to try to alter the content of video games, but I mean, even that's happening now.
See, I would actually, because, a lot of my friends who say, you look at the military and it's turned into a video game. So you want your top gamers to go in to be dropping bombs on actual people instead of just the play world, right?
Right, and it's interesting. I've seen some stories lately saying that the morale among drone pilots is low, right? So they're thinking about different incentives for drone pilots, ranging from monetary incentives to like giving them actual medals, which some other people in the military don't like because they're like, hey, they didn't risk their lives, why are they getting medals? So yeah, I think across numerous regions the morale is low, so they're responding with things like this, with trying to figure out, okay, how can we make the best-selling video games, portray the military better? How can we get our people into shows that are popular and watched that aren't even about the military, but they're just that make people feel like they're cool, that they're part of something if they join the military. It's sort of a government version of maybe like all those television shows about doctors, right? Like ER and Scrubs, Grey's Anatomy. People watch these and they feel like these are cool professions, and attractive people are in them, and you get to do all these things. And it's sort of a miniature version of that for the military, right? If they can get themselves inserted into the most watched television and movies, into the most played video games, even in pop culture and music, then they will be able to project that image that they think would boost the recruitment from rank and file people.
Yeah, I'm still kind of, I've never actually watched American Idol, to be honest with you, but I'm kind of finding how interesting how you try and get someone on there, and try and use one of these PSYOP guys to do this.
Yeah, I mean, they don't go into a whole lot of detail other than the fact that they were able to get someone who auditioned and was successful, and that was unfortunately voted off, and their interview was unfortunate. They don't go into a lot of detail, but some of the other ones, they talk about, they set up meetings with producers. They tend to try to get to the writers. They probably bring a lot of resources to bear. For example, they can bring people who've served in these regions and talking about sort of the image they want to project. So.
And cash.
So yeah, obviously, well, that's probably the longest used incentive that they have, in that that's what they do with, particularly with movies and television, is that if you want to use military hardware, you have to let them look at your script, and they can suggest edits to the script, and they can deny you access to military stuff you want to put in your movie. So if you want to ask why is Hollywood so pro-military for the most part, well, part of the reason why is because they couldn't realistically portray the military if the military didn't want them to portray them that way, because they control they lease all the equipment and everything.
That's a good point.
That's part of the reason for that.
And I would assume, again, it comes back down to the cash, because, I've never been one to believe that Hollywood does things out of the goodness of their heart. Everything comes with a price, and, the propagandists, they pay well.
Yeah, and actually, this is interesting. Just this week, Michael Moore, the documentary filmmaker and satirical filmmaker, he unveiled that his film, his next film will be about actually military-industrial complex, will be about wars and empire and everything, and it's actually releasing in a couple of weeks in Toronto, and that film festival will be its premiere. So I kind of thought about that. Is the military sort of prepping a response to his film, right? Because Michael Moore, he's polarizing figure for some, but he definitely gets around. He gets his name out there, and his movies always make a splash. So I'm almost wondering if, what are they doing to sort of counter that backlash, because they had a really good year. I mean, they had American Sniper, which just blew out all the projections for how a military movie can do. And I think after that good year, Michael Moore comes around, and we start having a presidential campaign where people are arguing about war and things like that. I could see the military feeling like it's falling behind in its own PSYOPs operation. So,
yeah, I mean, but the thing is they're not going after you or me. They're going after my kids. They're going after my 13-year-old daughter, my 9-year-old son. That's who they're going after. That's the target audience, right?
Yeah, and I mean, that's why, like, for example, Michael Bay's Transformers movies, like, the old school Transformers cartoons didn't have a very large role for, like, the U.S. military. But if you watch those films, which are targeted primarily at, like, grade, middle school, maybe early high school kids, they look like an advertisement for the U.S. military, right? Like, because that is exactly their target. I mean, they want to bring in young folks who will, maybe burn out by 22 or 23 years old. So, once you get up to our age, they're probably not even looking for us anymore. So, I mean, that's exactly right.
And that's what scares me. I mean, I look at, you go back and you think about some of the stuff that the Bush administration did with some of the education funding. to where, military recruiters have unlimited access to the schools, and they have the right to all of your home address, your phone number, all of this stuff. And the only way a parent can stop it is if they actually go and say that they don't want the kid's information being used. Not can you have the information, but no, you can't use it, which is really just twisted to me.
Yeah, and I mean, look, at the end of the day, I actually come from a family where my mom's side of the family was like career military. My sister actually works at the Pentagon, so like it's not like I'm in a position to say, well, these people are evil or anything. But I think that the issue is that I think when someone's thinking of joining the military, they should be able to be given a rational list of costs and benefits of doing so, right? And I think that the scale of these operations is sort of designed to not make people do that. It's just to sort of propagandize them, just to say, oh, the military is cool. Look at all the great things they're doing. Look at all the equipment you get to use. Look at, how great the camaraderie is. But they don't tell you about, for example, PTSD, which impacts, I don't know, a quarter or something of people coming back from warfare. And they don't tell you about, how difficult it can be to get your life back together, to get a job even. How many people you'll meet. Like, I volunteered at a local charity with indigent folks. How many of those people are veterans just because there's not enough resources for them? So I think all of these costs have to be presented just as well as the benefits. And I don't think it's really right for the government to kind of try to do a sales job on its own people, right? Like, they should give them a balanced view of what these institutions represent, what you can expect if you're going to join them. And I think that, particularly like you said, targeting children, which is what a lot of this is doing, is really not a fair way to sort of reason with Americans.
I'm with you. No, and look, I don't want to make it sound like I'm beating up on the military. Look, have your television ads and put all that stuff out there. It's that subliminal stuff that you just happen, like when you get a little bit older, you watch movies and things a little bit differently, and you go, well, why is that there? And you understand product placement and all that stuff. And this just kind of, it's right there for the kids to absorb.
Yeah, and I think that. I think that as long as we do have Bernie Sanders says we're going to an oligarchical form of government, but as long as we can at least consider ourselves a democratic form of government, we need to be able to have reasonable conversations with the citizenry about things like this. And I think a big part of the problem with making the military into this sort of like glamorous, impeccable institution is that it makes people also more dull to what people who are joining the military actually face. So like, we don't think so much about the cost of going to war in the first place, or we don't think so much about what we have to do for people who come back from wars, because we think, oh, it's such a great experience, or it's such a wonderful thing. They're heroes, they're not allowed to cry. That this all this sort of manly stuff that we sort of force onto our people who serve in our military. Like, this really cartoon image. At the end of the day, the only thing it really serves to do is to make wars easier and maybe to make recruitment easier. But I don't think it really makes the lives of people who serve easier, and it doesn't make our country, I think, wiser and more pragmatic about how we use the military to begin with.
Yeah, it's always easier to send someone else's kids off, which is why I've come around to the idea of mandatory conscription on some level to give people that you've got skin in this game.
Yeah, and also Charlie Rangel, the congressman from New York, I think he's from Brooklyn, maybe, or Harlem. He always introduces legislation every single year. He's, for the most part, a progressive Democrat, but he introduces legislation every single year, sort of calling for a draft. And some people get mad at him saying, why are you doing that? What's up with that? But he always, he makes the same point of view. Like, if there is this, if there are wars and there are military, why is the sacrifice so unequal? So.
Because it generally falls on the back of the poor kids. And I grew up in a housing project on the west side of Cleveland. I remember after Vietnam, those men coming back from the war and just being dumped in our community, and they had PTSD, they had horrible drug and alcohol problems, broken minds, broken bodies, and they were just dumped. And I throughout my life, I've said, if we're going to do those things again, we can't allow that to happen as well. And sadly, I hear the same kind of stories today, and it's frustrating.
Yeah, and I think probably the biggest difference between today and maybe 10 years ago is that I think the military has sort of turned into just not even an issue. Like, it's barely even discussed. There was a little bit of news hubbub about the Veterans Administration because there were some problems there. But really, it's become sort of an invisible institution, which is amazing because we have one of the world's biggest militaries, and we spend more money than anyone else, more than the rest of the world combined, basically, on our military. It's an economic engine in and of itself. There are entire communities based around the military, and yet I don't think that this realistic sort of view of the military even gets out there. There's either glamorization, which you see on television a lot, or maybe, occasionally there's a movie that comes out like American Sniper that a lot of people see and they just like talk about how great the military is. They don't really seriously address the problems with it. So yeah, I think that we have a serious problem in this country and that we have this massive institution, and yet outside of very small pockets, I don't think we have really serious, discussions about the problems with that institution and what we have to do to improve it and how it relates to our society.
Well, I don't see how you can have a discussion about it when everything is, you can't discuss it. Everything is about, if you say anything, you're being unpatriotic, and everywhere you go, every sporting event, every concert, whatever it is you're doing, there's always, let's have the flag and salute the soldiers and all of this stuff, which I'm in favor of. But you look at the money that's gone in to promoting that as well. That's one of those things that I don't think most people get, that we're actually paying for most of that.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that there's this weird thing in America. Well, it's not only in America, it's other places too. But I mean, this weird thing that's happened here is that, we talk about how much we love the military all the time. Like if you bring it up, instantly everyone has to show a lot of humility, say, we support them, they're brave, sacrifice. And yet we don't look at what's happened to our veteran population. How many of them are homeless? How many of them have mental health care problems that aren't being addressed? How many of them have lack of good jobs? And then we don't look at what's actually happening to people who are serving. We saw this war in Iraq, we saw the war in Afghanistan, we see how many tours people were doing, we saw how families were torn apart. And we it's almost like we demand, it's almost like a religion, right? Like we demand people to say something about these people, but we don't actually want to examine what's happening to their lives, what's happening to us as a result, what's happening to people overseas as a result. And that's not a healthy way to look at anything. Religion has its place and politics has its place, but the two shouldn't mix, right? So, and I think that's what's happened when you make this into sort of a black and white religious thing, instead of really examining the pros and cons of the things we do with the military.
Excellent point. If you want to check out the article written by Zed Jelani over at Alternet, we've got a link at thericksmithshow.com. He asked the question, Pentagon influences TV shows like American Idol. New documents show scary collaboration. We've got a link. You can take a look at which of your favorite shows may be getting money or be part of this. Zed, it was great talking with you. I appreciate you taking time for us, man.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
Thanks so much. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1970. That was the day the United Farm Workers, led by Cesar Chavez, signed their first union contract in California. It was a milestone victory for agricultural workers. Farm workers, often Mexican immigrants, had very strenuous working conditions. They worked long hours in the fields for extreme poverty wages. In the event that housing was provided, it was often unsanitary and of very poor quality. Filipino organizers sought to improve working conditions for agricultural workers. After the U.S. colonized the Philippines, many Filipinos were recruited to work on California farms. They began organizing as early as the 1930s, forming the Agricultural Workers Organizing Committee. The Agricultural Workers Organizing Committee reached prominence by the 1950s. At the same time, Mexican-American Cesar Chavez, along with Dolores Huerta, founded the National Farm Workers Association to organize the Mexican workers who were increasingly dominating the labor force in the fields. The Agricultural Workers Organizing Committee went on strike against the grape growers near Delano, California. Their goal was to get a raise of 20 cents per hour. When the owners refused to negotiate, the Agricultural Workers Organizing Committee reached out to Chavez. The two groups merged to create the United Farm Workers. The United Farm Workers Union was able to get the support of many in the public through a boycott of California grapes. While the boycott drought lasted some 5 years, grape growers received considerably negative press and suffered financially. As a result, on July 29, 1970, growers agreed to a contract with the United Farm Workers, the first such agreement in farm labor history. So the next time you're enjoying those tasty grapes, think about the workers and their brave efforts to unionize farm workers. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
We've been talking about the early days of the hotel business in America and an ambitious man named Harvey Parker. From the time he set foot in Boston, Parker worked hard, built a successful restaurant business, and by 1854, he was preparing for the biggest business venture of his life. In summary, he set out to build the best first-class hotel and restaurant in Boston, and he scored big. The list of rich and famous patrons at the Parker House goes on for pages. Poets Longfellow, Emerson, and Thoreau, ball players Babe Ruth, Ted Williams, and others. And John Wilkes Booth was registered there on April 5th and 6th, 1865, 1 week before he shot President Lincoln. There were even some staff members that became famous, such as Ho Chi Minh, a Parker House cook, and Malcolm X, who was a busboy. But join us again for the politicians. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME. We make Pennsylvania happy!
Bringing sanity and rational thought back to America. Rick Smith.
Hey, it's your tomorrow. Right now, come on, it's everything. Right now, it's a magic moment. Do it right here and now.
Talking about sanity. This is one of those stories that, occasionally, every once in a while you see this. And I got to be honest, any religion that tells me that I've got to reach into a box and pick up a snake that if it bit me could kill me, I got to be honest, I think I'll find another religion. But that's what happened in Kentucky. A 60-year-old worshiper, they say, on Sunday, died after being bitten by a rattlesnake. Now, I've talked about this before because I've had friends who were the snake handler types. And, it was always curious to me. Honestly, the guy was allergic to soap and water, but rattlesnakes wasn't a problem. He was one of these guys who I guess they do it once a year or twice, whatever it was, whatever their religious ceremony is, where you reach in the box and you pick up the snake and you do some kind of weird dance. I don't know. And I've said, what happens if you get bitten? What happens? The snake goes, you know what? You look appetizing, and takes a chunk out of your behind. Do you just die? And they would go, no, we've got the antivenom right there. And I'm going, but wait a second. Then what the hell's the point of the thing? Because they believe it's one of these things that they believe that it's God's will that you be bitten. And I think it comes from there's a passage in the book of Mark 16:18, that says, that followers of Jesus will pick up snakes with their hands, and when they drink deadly poison, it will not hurt them at all. They will place their hands on sick people, and they will get well. So out of this one little blurb, you now have idiot people reaching into a box with rattlesnakes and getting bitten. Because according to my friend Joey, it had happened a number of times in his snake venom church. And they have the antivenom, you get shot, you're evidently okay. Go to the hospital, they take care of you, you're fine. This guy, well, he says, no, I'm not going to, this 60-year-old guy, I'm not going to take the antivenom. God's will. And I have respect for this guy. I honestly and truthfully have respect for this guy. The other people, the ones who get the antivenom, no respect for you. But this guy, I got to be honest, Sean, I've got some respect. You bought the line. It's the will of God. God has decided that the snake will bite me, and I shall succumb to the snake bite. I mean, because it's their twisted, bizarre belief. And look, who am I to mock their beliefs? If you truly believe it, I respect that.
Yeah, I mean, good. See it. One less person at the party.
So are you reaching into the box?
No, I am not. Though in high school, my biology teacher had a 15-foot boa constrictor in class, and every morning, when we have them in lab, we would get to watch the teacher feed the snake some mice, and he also had like a 4-foot alligator too. So we would get to watch biology in action, but no, I would never want to reach into it.
Did he want you to wear the boa constrictor around your neck?
Yeah, I actually did a couple times. I have them on my shoulders.
All right, well.
But
again, another night. So what happens if it decides, you know what, I want to make a permanent tie around your neck?
He's not moving that fast, but
Okay.
he's a domesticated snake.
A domesticated snake.
But no, I would not reach into I would never want to reach into a box of snakes. I've been camping most of my life since I was like 12 years old, and I have never come across a snake in the wild. It's one of those animals I don't really want to be around. When I'm out, I've seen bears and stuff like that, but don't want to be around a snake. You know what I mean?
I just, wow. I mean, but then there's a part of me that goes, you know what? If he truly believes this, maybe he's in a better place now.
Nah.
And there's part of me that goes, this is how we thin.
He's
the
in the
herd.
ground.
This is how we thin the herd. It's weird to me.
I hear 6 feet under is a cool place. 55 degrees.
That's what I'm told.
The
problem with 6 feet under is that ashes to ashes, dust to dust thing takes 1,000 years. Problem is when you're down that far, there's nothing to eat you and turn you back into dirt. They say the optimal, if you want to go back to dirt, the optimal depth is 18 inches, because that's where the worms and all the bugs and all the stuff that they recycle you.
Yeah, without the embalming fluid.
Without the embalming fluid, which is why I told my wife, if you can sell me, do that, especially if you can get it by the pound. Just a thought. There you go. Let's take a quick break. Right back with the news. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
I'll never bend. I'm with you now. Until the end.
Thought-provoking, intelligent conversation with a heart. The voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
Not some homes, not most homes, every home in America.
Hillary Clinton pledges to go big, very big, on solar. Jeb Bush calls for eliminating all energy subsidies. Plus,
Well, this is the biggest threat that the planet faces.
new study suggests worst-case sea level rise may be sooner than we think.
Fantastic. All of those worst cases and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Well, I'm not a scientist either. I'm just a grandmother with 2 eyes and a brain, and I know we're facing a huge problem from climate change.
Well, way to lose the one-eyed grandmother vote, Hillary. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, I got to say, the fact that the candidates for 2016 are now being pushed to come out with climate plans, now being pushed to come out with answers. The answers are terrible, frankly. I'm not impressed with pretty much any of them. But at least the corporate media seems to be holding their feet to the fire this time around, unlike in 2012.
That's right. It is a whole new ball game with the presidential campaign actually talking about climate change.
Imagine that.
So let's talk about it. First, Republican Jeb Bush called for eliminating specialized tax credits for all energy sources at a campaign fundraiser in Iowa over the weekend. He's the first Republican candidate to even mention oil and gas taxpayer subsidies enjoyed by the wildly profitable oil and gas industry. Now, while eliminating subsidies for all energy might sound fair, it's not actually fair at all. Oil, gas, and coal have enjoyed direct taxpayer subsidies for nearly 100 years and indirect subsidies like U.S. military protection around the world. They also get the biggest subsidy of all. They don't have to pay for the cost of their pollution. You do.
Yeah, I love the idea that, we shouldn't subsidize anyone. We shouldn't pick winners and losers. Well, the winners in this case happen to be the most profitable industries in the history of civilization. And now Jeb Bush wants to pull up the ladder. So no one else in any of these new energy industries, they just can't enjoy the same thing that fossil fuel did for 100 years or so.
Now, Hillary Clinton spoke of rebalanced taxpayer subsidies for energy in her major speech on climate change, rolling out what she said was the first plank of a comprehensive climate policy on Monday in Des Moines, Iowa. Secretary Clinton says the U.S. can be the world's clean energy superpower by going big on solar.
We need more than 500 million solar panels installed across the country by the end of my first term. A 10-year goal of generating enough renewable energy to power every single home in America. Not some homes, not most homes, every home in America.
So that's a pretty big pledge to make. It would be a 700% increase over current rates of solar panel installation. And she also wants to power all homes in the U.S. within 10 years with renewable energy.
Yeah, but I think I need to mention, if you talk to scientists, what she's proposing, at least as of now, is not nearly enough.
True. At that campaign event on Monday, Clinton declined to comment on the Keystone XL pipeline. Climate activist Bill McKibben said of Clinton's plan, quote, Hillary Clinton is halfway there. Now we need Clinton to show she understands the other half of the climate change equation, which he says is keeping it in the ground. As for Clinton's fellow challengers for the Democratic nomination, former Maryland Governor Martin O'Malley has actually gone even further. His energy policy, released last month, calls for the U.S. to be 100% renewable energy by 2050, as in no fossil fuels at all. Now, that is technically feasible with today's technology, but not with today's Republican Party in control of Congress. A disturbing new study now says that further delay in moving away from fossil fuels could unleash rapid sea level rise. That's according to a former NASA climate chief, James Hansen, who has co-authored a bombshell new study warning that global warming could accelerate extreme weather and rising seas. In an interview with CBS News, he said sea levels could potentially rise as fast as 10 feet in just 50 years.
If we get sea level rise of several meters, all coastal cities become dysfunctional.
And when he says dysfunctional, he means like goodbye Miami. In an interview with the Broadcast this week, climate scientist Michael Mann, who was not involved in Hansen's new study, says the study makes a strong case that climate change is proceeding faster and is larger in magnitude than previous predictions.
We have tended to underestimate the rate and magnitude of the changes. And he's put together a pretty compelling picture here of what a worst case scenario might look like. And it's not pretty.
It's not pretty at all. And compelling is a very nice way to put it. Terrifying is the way I might describe it. For much more on that story and even some more encouraging ones, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Don't forget, you can download our reports anytime for free from Stitcher, TuneIn, or iTunes. Find us and follow us on the Facebook and the Twitters at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
The tide is high, but I'm holding on. I'm gonna be your
The most important issues of the day. This is the Rick Smith Show.
I got news for you. And it's going down.
I'm still hung up on this Lou Barlotta thing. My congressman saying that, the Iranian, we're going to be teaching our kids to hide under the desks. We're going to be teaching them just like we did when we were kids. And, I always wondered as a kid, because we did it too, in the 70s. That's what we were taught. The Soviets are coming. We had this idea of MAD. For those of my age group, you'll remember mutually assured destruction, that we had leaders on both sides with their thumbs on the button. And any minute, one could get an itch, and it was all over. It's all over. So hide under the desk, which I just thought was really twisted, because I go, if they drop a bomb on us, what's the desk going to do? Nothing. But you got a lot of, again, preaching the fear, man. Preaching the fear. Anyway, let's find out what's going around in Washington, D.C. and around the world. Justin Duckham, Talk Radio News Service. Justin, should we be back under our desks again?
I think that certainly should be something that we should be aware of. Not just for nuclear war, but I grew up in California. We had a lot of earthquakes, and I have a lot of memories of being told to duck under my desk when I was a kid. Do you remember the Loma Prieta earthquake in 1989?
I do.
Yeah. Okay. So
I was here.
Yeah. That actually happened right where I grew up, to sort of kind of show how close it was to the fault line. My elementary school was actually called Loma Prieta Elementary School, and so we kind of grew up in sort of the post-traumatic era of the earthquake, where we were absolutely paranoid about that happening again. And, it was just something that was drilled very deeply into our skulls, what to do for earthquake protection. So I'm sure a lot of it I could probably just transfer to nuclear war once Iran tries to attack us, and I could probably just duck under my desk.
There you go. The desk solves it all. What happened to your desk during the earthquake?
I don't, I was actually, that was before I was in school, but this is actually my first memory, and it's absolutely terrifying, and I hate it, and it sucks. But I remember being in the kitchen with my, little sister, and my dad grabbing me and shoving me and my mother and sister under the table. And this is probably the worst Freudian first memory ever, but I yelled, "Dad, you're hurting me." And he replied, "I don't care." So that's kind of awful. Yes, obviously I had good intentions, but that's unfortunately the first thing I remember as a human being.
Wow. I'm sure your father's thrilled about that memory. All the Little League, all of the hours, doing this, that, and the other thing, all of the hours of work, all you remember is that. All right.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, it just goes to show, man. So what's going on there?
My son's first memory will be me putting him under the table once Iran attacks us.
All right. Well, we've all got to do something, I guess. So what's going on around the world? What's going on in Congress there?
Well, we have Congress leaving at the end of today for their long August recess, the lower chamber at least, and there's a lot of fun stuff happening. Yesterday, Mark Meadows, a congressman from North Carolina, released a measure to essentially oust Boehner. That has sort of taken a lot of oxygen out of the room. Boehner today responded in his final press conference before leaving, essentially saying that this is something that doesn't really matter. He said that there are essentially just one or two members who have sort of wandered off the reservation. He went on to say that he has the vast support of a wide array of his colleagues, saying essentially he's not going to bring this up for a vote since it seems like it would be unnecessary. But this is going to be interesting. Boehner and the other Republicans are going to be going back to their home districts, and quite likely a lot of, talk radio, a lot of the more fringe elements, a lot of people who are really anti-Boehner are probably going to be hammering on this for quite some time, and this is probably going to be something that a lot of run-of-the-mill Republicans are going to have to face when they get back home, and this could escalate into a pretty big fun issue.
So did he really say off the reservation?
Yes, he did.
He really did. That I've been told that's a racist comment.
I could see that being.
As someone who has American Indian blood in him, I am offended.
Yeah, no, we should all harp on this. If this is the thing that brings down Boehner's career, I'd be pretty surprised.
So look, I mean, this is really just like I think, as you've said, just kind of a fringe, but it's funny though. I got to be honest, and it does show how ineffective he has been as a leader and how the Tea Party has just ripped the Republican Party apart.
No, terrible figure, and you gotta look at this in context. Everyone says that it's so hard for John Boehner. Poor guy, he has these disparate interests. He has about 40 congressmen total, probably 40 to 70 who disagree with him on things. And wait, that's nothing though. Take a look at Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi was a speaker who was able to get blue dog Democrats the progressives, these widely different caucuses all on the same page to pass huge pieces of controversial legislation, not the least of which was the Healthcare Reform Act, and somehow was able to get those votes done in time. And Boehner facing, I would argue probably much less of a threat to his power, or a caucus that probably much more in line, can't really get a lot of simple votes done, which is absolutely remarkable.
Yeah, I mean, the hammer, he is not.
No, he is certainly no Tom DeLay.
It's amazing to me. And I got to be honest, I was amazed that he was picked in the first place. Because he's really, I don't see him as someone who's a leader. I don't know that anyone there does.
No, he's not. And of course, he sort of rose from the ashes of Dennis Hastert. He was somebody who's sort of a behind the scenes guy, kind of a reluctant dude, rising up in the ranks. And it really kind of took a lot of people by surprise that this would, be the go-to choice for speaker. But I guess perhaps what's most interesting about this is there really is no sort of alternative for Speaker of the House if the conservatives get their way on this. For a while there was Eric Cantor, who was sort of waiting in the wings, so sort of biting at the chance to be Speaker, pretty transparently so. And now we don't necessarily have anything out there. Boehner's a pretty ineffective leader, but McCarthy is also a pretty terrible majority leader. He was somebody who was also a terrible whip, somebody who couldn't basically finish the one job of being a whip, which is to one, rally support, and two, keep an effective list going for who's going to vote on what. We saw him fail at that time and time again, and I think I don't think there's a lot of appetite among House Republicans.
Let's make him president instead. I mean, can't do that job, fail upward.
Yeah, there we go.
So are we going to get a house? Are we going to get a bill on this transportation thing? Are we going to have funding?
Yeah.
Is it going to happen?
We are for about 3 months, it looks like. The House just voted a little while ago by 385 to 34, with one voting present for a 3-month extension of the Highway Trust Fund. This is going to be followed by the Senate probably taking this on tomorrow while holding their nose. They were obviously trying to get a longer version of this bill, one that would last for about 6 years, before the House decided to essentially jettison that. And we have the White House saying that, although they would prefer a longer bill as well, they're also going to be probably seeing the president sign this temporary extension.
Right.
So 3 months down the road, kicking the can, and then they're going to meet again and have the probably same exact issue.
Here's what I don't get, and maybe you've got a different sense there. Here's what I just don't get about Boehner and the rest of them. You generally want to get this stuff out of the way early in the term, so you've got the rest of your term to go so people can gain a little bit of political amnesia. You want to have a long enough deal to where it doesn't keep coming up. I don't understand why we keep having these continuing resolutions and short-term funding bills and all of this stuff that keep everything in the public eye. I would think that you want to get that kind of stuff down the road and bicker over other things that you can separate yourself out.
That's a very good question. I think this is just sort of the new way that Congress has decided to carry things out. It's sort of this, leadership by brinksmanship, wherein there's always going to be crisis that's going to happen at the last minute, and we're going to see members of Congress scramble to get things done. It's a little bit unfortunate to watch. It's kind of how I manage most of my responsibilities in life. I wait until the last minute and then sort of do a half and half job. And, Congress is, it's unfortunate to see lawmakers kind of acting like a mature 28-year-old.
Yeah, well, or like 8-year-olds in the sandbox. Reminds me of grade school.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point.
Maybe we could push them under their desk. Just a thought. And finally, it looks like a bad week for Pennsylvania Democrats, to be honest. We've had a bunch of Democrats in this state who have found themselves under investigation or indicted. The mayor of Harrisburg, like 4 million counts of whoever knows what they slapped on there. Out in Allentown, you got the mayor being investigated. Reading mayor getting investigated. One of their key consultants was wearing a wire, and now he's in secret hiding with police protection. And now this. Now in Philadelphia, you got Shaka Fatah. What's going on here?
Well, Shaka Fatah and 4 individuals who he is associated with are faced with a 29-count indictment. This includes, I'm reading off a list here from the DOJ, racketeering conspiracy, bribery, conspiracy to commit mail fraud, wire and honest services fraud, multiple counts of mail fraud, falsifications of records, bank fraud, making false statements to a financial institution, and money laundering. A lot of this goes back to, the way that Congressman Fata essentially tried to, reuse funds for a nonprofit that he was, associated with. He at one point was trying to pay back about $1 million to a campaign financer. He ended up giving about $400,000 by himself, but then paid the remaining $600,000 by using funds illegally through his nonprofit for that. He also apparently paid about $130,000 through federal grants to individual consultants to try to, pay back some money that he owed there for campaigning. So a long list of pretty bizarre stuff. As a result of this, he has stepped down from the Appropriations Committee. He says that it's temporarily, but it doesn't look like he's going to be returning to a position anytime soon.
Yeah, well, maybe he can take over as head guy there in the big house. I don't know.
Yeah.
But you look at this. The guy's in a safe district. How did he have to rack up this kind of money to run a campaign in a district that he couldn't lose?
That's a very good question. We haven't really seen any justification yet coming from Congressman Fata. But I'm sure it's going to be one of the questions that's going to be asked down the road. Either way, though, it just looks like a, idiocy, but idiocy with a lot of planning behind it.
Jeez, it's just nuts, man. I don't get it. I don't get what these guys. I just don't get it. Which is why I'm not one of them. There you go, Justin. I appreciate the time, man.
Hey, thank you, Rick.
Thanks so much, Justin Duckham, Talk Radio News Service. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
When it comes to pursuing their prey, sharks are master maneuverers. Loan sharks, that is. These days, this usurious species goes by the less threatening name of payday lenders. But they are no less voracious, targeting folks in rough financial straits and luring them with easy money come-ons. With lethal interest rates of more than 700%, automatic renewal clauses, and other razor-sharp gotchas, a $500 payday loan can sink a hapless borrower thousands of dollars into debt. That's why states have been restricting the sharks' interest rate gouging and entrapment techniques. But with a flip of their tails, many payday lenders are simply swimming around state laws by operating online and offshore from such regulatory safe harbors as the Bahamas, the Isle of Man, and Malta. From there, sharks can make loans, then begin devouring their borrowers' bank accounts, even in states that ban such loans. How can shady operators pull off billions of dollars worth of these devious and maybe illegal transactions each year? With inside help from such pillars of the financial establishment as Bank of America, J.P. Morgan Chase, and Wells Fargo. Of course, these upstanding corporate citizens don't dirty their hands or reputations by making these predatory loans, but they willingly allow offshore sharks to tap directly into the borrower's checking accounts and withdraw unconscionable interest payments electronically and mercilessly. There's a 4-letter F word for what the banks are doing to their own depositors: fees. Automatic withdrawals by the sharks can cause a tsunami of overdrafts in a borrower's bank account, and banks happily collect fat fees for every overdraft. This is Jim Hightower saying, for more information and action, go to responsiblelending.org.
To get more of Jim Hightower's populist take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to, visit www.hightowerlowdown.org.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, this is your World in 2. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, with the Talk Radio News Service. The U.S. and Turkey have announced plans to create a safe zone inside Syria, free of Islamic State fighters. The plan would likely involve U.S. and Turkish aircraft providing cover for Syrian opposition forces battling the Islamic State on the ground. The area targeted for that safe zone is located north and east of Aleppo, where rebel fighters are vying with the Islamic State for control of the Turkish border region. Officials in Washington have been upbeat about Turkey's newfound willingness to assist in the Syria campaign, but widening American participation could create problems down the road. For instance, what if rebel forces backed by U.S. airstrikes decide to attack Syrian troops loyal to President Bashar al-Assad? Or what if Turkey attacks Kurdish forces that it sees as a threat to domestic security? Those questions may take some time to answer, but simply declaring plans for a safe zone could have immediate ramifications for Syrian civilians, hundreds of thousands of whom are located along the Turkish border and are desperately seeking shelter. At the UN today, Emergency Relief Coordinator Stephen O'Brien said Syrians face humanitarian suffering on a gargantuan scale, but he cautioned Turkey and the U.S. against making promises they can't guarantee.
We certainly want to work very closely with whatever is proposed, but there is a very clear need from the humanitarian's point of view is you don't want to declare something a safe zone, wherever it may be, which would then, of course, very quickly attract people, given that we have a sort of a very severely traumatized series of communities and populations around Syria, where I use the phrase, the awful choice that many people have to flee or to stay and die.
For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
Would you dive 14 feet deep into Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13.
Chaka Khan, Chaka Khan, Chaka Khan, Chaka Khan, Chaka Khan, let me rock it, Chaka Khan, let me rock it, that's all I wanna do, Chaka Khan, let me rock it, Chaka Khan, let me rock it, let me feel for you, Chaka Khan, what you tell me what you wanna do, really feel for me the way I feel for you, Chaka Khan, let me tell you what I wanna do.
I gotta tell you, I do feel for Shaka Khan. Shaka Fatah, who, the way things look, not good. Not good. What was 29 counts, 29 bits of indictment of moving money around and, failed mayor. And the thing that gets me is, you're running in a district that you
is basically gerrymandered to your advantage.
Exactly. I mean, but even that, I don't think you could gerrymander that district to where he could lose, to be honest.
Maybe during a primary, but
maybe. But at the end of it, you're in one of the safest districts in the state. How much money do you need to raise?
Well, this was from his mayoral run, wasn't it?
I know. 2007. Yeah, that's what they're saying. That's part of it.
And another thing is, we were talking about his wife, who's a news anchor, and she got caught selling a 1980s Porsche to some local lobbyist for $20,000, right, to put the mortgage down on their Pocono summer home. And she kept on paying for the registration of the vehicle, kept on paying for it to be up and repairs for it.
So are you saying
the
that
afterwards.
the lobbyist gave her $20,000 she got to keep the car?
Well, she wasn't indicted on anything, but that's what it looks like.
Is that what it looks like? How do you know she just wasn't taking care of it for them?
I guess they're just being generous now, aren't we?
See, we don't live in that world where we have a disposable car that we can just lend other people to indefinitely. I mean, when you get up in the upper echelon, they live much differently than you and I do. In fact, it's more communal living. If there's a car there, they just go drive it.
Communal?
Yeah.
I thought they don't like communism.
Well, they love socialism as long as it's us picking up the check at the end of the night. But wow, just not a good week for Democrats here in Pennsylvania. I mean, not a good year. I mean, this has been a bad year.
In 10 months, or 8 months, we saw 10 people go down.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, and who's next? The dominoes keep falling. And you go, Tom Corbett isn't even involved in all of this. I mean, before, at least you go, well, he had aspirations to be a governor. You target them. You use your power to do that. Wow. I guess, I don't know. I just don't know. Very odd. So what do you think of Sarah Palin being the running mate of Donald Trump?
Let's do it.
I'm on board with this. I'm on board with the idea.
Crazy 8 years later.
I don't know that Donald would be dumb enough, but he said some very nice things about her as well. Now, if you listen and you pay attention, Palin's out there actually defending, and this is one of those weird kind of moments where Palin ran with McCain in 2008 and basically tanked any opportunity of him ever being president or anything other than the butt of a couple of jokes politically. But she actually went on and called Trump a hero, basically, after the whole McCain thing. And you go, really? Because he's willing to say that anything he wants, he's a hero? And I guess in her world, yes.
I didn't know that we could top 2012 or 2008.
I was hoping we could.
But, I mean, like, I think I've been telling you this off the air. They should just make next week's debate pay-per-view TV.
Oh,
I mean, Fox News should just put that on pay-per-view, and it will just be they'll make millions of dollars off of it. Millions more, considering what Maddow had a special on last night, talking about all of the ad money that they're just sucking up because of the rules of their debate.
Yeah.
And how they're just basically acting as the gatekeepers now. I mean, all the ad money,
smart they are.
All the ad money is going away from Iowa and New Hampshire, and it's going right into Fox News. They have found a way to.
They're smart
to exploit the campaign cash that's out there.
And I was always under the impression that the wealth class started Fox News so that they could make money off of it and they'd have their thing, but also so it wouldn't cost them a boatload of money down. They'd have a whole network that they could just pound their message constantly. They still have to pay for it, which, wow, what kind of a setup is that?
Yeah, and I mean, this makes Karl Rove look like a pulper.
Makes him look like a piker, man. And you look at this and you just got to wonder, how far does this go? How far down the line? How far does Trump take this? And how far do the Republicans go with him? I mean, at some point, this debate can't be on who's going to out-Trump Trump. There's got to be someone who's going to go, you're a sideshow, and the rest of us have to. There's got to be someone who takes command of that stage.
But what's going to happen after he does that?
That's the question. Somebody's got to, and maybe this is one of those, one of the ankle biter candidates, who just maybe got in because they're the last one. Maybe saying, look, you're a sideshow. This isn't what the American people
Imagine
want.
if that's coming from Ben Carson. I mean, he has not said, I like what Ben Carson's doing. I mean, like the other day, Mike Huckabee said the stuff he said just to get attention. But Ben Carson, you haven't heard a word from him.
No.
I mean, he's just hasn't said a word. And he's still polling at 6%. He's like in fourth or fifth place.
I can't wait for it. Anyway, thanks for being here. If you missed any portion of the program, thericksmithshow.com. It's going to be fun. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email rick@thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Its color like the tide of flood beneath the lunar sway. Imperial, mysterious, in amorous array. Democracy is coming to the USA.